Rejoice, everyone. We're back with another Sekhie Reacts to Fate. This one ended up much longer than I anticipated when I originally put this on the schedule. And it's not because it was it's changed since then. I just forgot about a lot of things with this character.
I'm going to be honest. At first, when we put this into the schedule, I put Marie Antoinette and Louis XVI on accident because I thought...
You thought logically the 16th.
We'd be talking about Louis XVI. Logically, that seemed to me like that was what was going to happen. And then I was corrected and told it was, in fact, the 17th. Which is, I mean, que sera, whatever.
I'm giving you... I literally just, like, a footnote less homework here.
Yeah. To be honest, we really should have just lumped in Louis. I mean, Louis XVI is essentially just going to be part of this story regardless.
Unfortunately, I don't have a Louis XVI to present to you today.
It's fine. It's still going to be part of the story. Hot take right here and now. In my opinion, Marie Antoinette deserves to have the innocent monster skill. And I don't know if she does, but hot take right here and now, she deserves to have the innocent monster skill. And I don't think... Because it's not that we think of her as, like, a brutal bitch who did all these, like, horrible things, right? Like Carmilla or Elizabeth Bathory, Or doesn't Wu Zetian have it?
Yeah.
Yeah, or Wu Zetian.
Actually, I don't know if Wu Zetian has it. I'd have to double check that.
Well, but you know what I mean. Like,
yeah.
the few innocent monsters we've done have gotten that title because they have, like, these stories or histories of them being, like, these absolute, like, brutal... like murderers, essentially. I don't think that's why she deserves it, but I do think, and obviously, comment if you disagree with me, I do think that Marie Antoinette is slapped because she is a woman and because her excesses were sort of more visible than many others because of the way that women were expected to dress and act and behave, and because she was largely kept away from sort of this influential power with people, right? She was kept pretty sequestered away in her own area. I largely think that, in all honesty, she has been unfairly demonized and assigned sort of the common person's lion's share of the blame for the excesses that led to the French Revolution, which is essentially what we're going to be talking about today. And I don't think that's fair.
So... You won't see me disagreeing with you. In fact, I always do my own mini research and notes. Look at the very last line of my notes here.
Yeah. So, because I personally think, and here's another hot take, right? Empress Maria Theresa is the cause of destabilization in modern Europe in the 1800s. Hot take. Because, you think about... We're going back a little ways before Marie Antoinette, but because Maria Theresa is her mother. But Empress Maria Theresa had 16 children, 13 of which survived infancy, and I think of those, 10 of them survived to adulthood. She lost like at least 4 to 5, maybe 6 of them. But of her 10 children, they essentially married into every single important royal family in all of Europe, which only compounded pre-existing inbreeding issues. And also, because of the period, her children are the ones who kind of became the figureheads of this ridiculous wealth overspend of royals that became more and more something that people were rallying against in the late 1700s into the early 1800s. And because she obviously kind of controlled her children with an iron fist. Like, Empress Maria Theresa was known to write letters to every single one of her children weekly throughout their adulthood, telling them what they could and couldn't do and what political actions they needed to take for the betterment of Europe as a whole. She engineered every single one of her children's marriages as a political profit for herself and for her own empire. Not a single one of them was just sort of, I met this dude and I fell in love, or I want this match with this count even though he's not a prince or a princess. No. So I personally think that a lot of monarch destabilization in Europe traces directly back to Empress Maria Theresa through the lines of her children. And if anyone should be demonized in history for being a woman and having objectively bad takes and making bad decisions, it should be her, not any of her children.
See, I'm not going to be posting the entirety of my notes and analysis because I really went in on my notes and analysis. My general take was Marie Antoinette is kind of just...
There.
I'd say she is the... Pokimane is to the Twitch community as Marie Antoinette is to the European nobility.
Yeah, she's there.
She's the easy target for common problems that everybody in that community is partaking in.
She is there, and she represents excess at a time when excess was executionable. And as all women do in general, because of women's fashion trends, women will always visibly exemplify wealth in a more tangible manner than men do, because wealth is associated with jewels, huge skirts, tons of fabric, extravagant wigs, extravagant crowns, hair, servants, all things that while men also have, are not as easy to spot by those of lower classes as the things are on women. Because the job of a woman is to be decked out in all of your finery so that people can admire how much you're wearing, whilst the job of men is not exactly the same, at least in terms of fashion. Like, you're certainly supposed to show off your wealth as a man, but the levels of excess are not the same, and they are not as easily understandable. Mm-hmm. And so she makes a very visible target. I mean, even looking at paintings and images of her. And it is very easy for a person who cannot afford to eat to look at a portrait of Marie Antoinette and go, look at that bitch wearing so many sapphires, I could feed my entire village for a year.
Well, that's not to say that the European, or that she didn't have terrible takes on the politics of the time, or that her spending wasn't in excess. It was, and they were terrible takes.
Yes.
But also, those were takes that everybody else in European nobility had, and that spending excess was just common across the board.
Yeah, I mean, keep in mind, she became the Dauphine, the Princess of France, when she was 14, when she got married. And she became the Queen of France 4 years later. She was 18. Mm-hmm. Who the fuck isn't a little stupid at 18? I know I spent money that I didn't necessarily have at 18 when I wanted something. And I don't... Maybe I can't say I don't represent nearly the amount of excess as Empress Marie Antoinette, because what is this if not modern day wealth excess? I'm mostly kidding. It's not. Most of my books are used, and I get good deals on stuff, and this is years and years of work, so it's not the equivalent of putting a dress on that is worth an entire village's living expenses for a year, but it's something easy to do. So I think, hot take, this is all Maria Theresa's fault. And she should have been a little less controlling of her children and maybe a little bit more empathetic to the common people rather than furthering her own empire. Although I cannot blame her for wanting security in her empire.
Well, I'm glad we got the societal commentary part out of the way.
Oh, that's not all of the societal commentary.
Oh, it never is with French Revolution stuff.
God, it never is. You know what? I was looking at this, and obviously, as we learned in the Paladins of Charlemagne, there is a massive amount of information available on more modern historical figures. When I'm talking to you about Achilles, it's not going to have nearly the same amount of information as me talking to you about Marie Antoinette. So sit down, buckle up, and expect a fairly long history section, because I'm going to pepper in some... Because I'm going to try to pepper in some commentary as I go. But I truly do feel that if I'm really going to cover everything, I will, out of necessity, need to miss certain things. I will try to focus mostly on kind of the more bare-bone details of her lives, maybe some interesting anecdotes, but I'm certainly not going to recite everything we know about her life, because her life was so extravagantly documented that I'm pretty sure that someone somewhere has the literal handwritten records of the money she spent on dresses for every single year. Because if they had that for the women in Japan in the 1600s, which we talked about when we talked about Cha-Cha, they definitely had that for Marie Antoinette 300 years later. But I think it's important to note Marie Antoinette was born in 1755 in Vienna as the youngest daughter of Maria Theresa, who was at the time the ruler of the Habsburg Empire, Empire, and her husband, Francis I, who was the Holy Roman Empire. Emperor of the Empire. Those two words. Anyways. So she was born on a Catholic holiday, and so her birthday would always be celebrated on a different day, and was raised together with her siblings, several of her siblings. Not all of them, because like I said, her mother had 16 kids, and if you're popping out a kid a year, even that, you're going to have a 16-year age gap between the oldest and the youngest. But she was close to her closest sister in age, Maria Carolina, who was 3 years older than her, and they did have a close relationship through their entire life. From what we know, she did have what would amount to an overall affectionate relationship with her mother. There's definitely feelings there, but there was definitely some struggles represented in their interactions with one another. And a lot of that is likely due to the fact that she was the youngest child, and that also her mother was a bit of a controlling tyrant when it came to the lives of her children. So we know for a fact that when she was 7, she actually met Mozart, who was 2 months younger than her, at court in Vienna. And unfortunately, by the age of 10, it had become evident that while her parents paid for very good schooling and tutors for her, it was not paying off in the way that it had for other royal heirs of the time, as at that point she could not write in German or any other court language like French or Italian, and truly struggled with conversations in those languages, unfortunately. She did have somewhat of a talent in music that was nurtured by the teacher Christoph Gluck, but languages were never her strong point, and neither was...
What you're saying, so that she wasn't a modern philosopher of her time?
She was not. He taught her how to play the harpsichord, and the flute, and she was known to have a really wonderful singing voice, as she would sing during the evening gatherings her family would hold, and was quite good at dancing as well. In 1767, one of her older sisters, Maria Josepha, died from smallpox in an epidemic of that same year, and this made a pretty large impression on young Marie Antoinette. Later in life, she would remember her older sister taking her into her arms, and her older sister, she said, told her that she would not be traveling to marry King Ferdinand IV of Naples, to whom she was supposed to be betrothed, the first of the political marriages, but instead she would be traveling soon to the family vault. And that apparently left quite a mark on Marie Antoinette, and I can imagine it would. Having one of your older sisters just tell you that sort of thing is kind of horrifying, especially because it has been noted in historical record that her siblings who died of smallpox, and there I think were 2 or 3 of them, several of them died in extreme pain and agony after long battles with the disease. And her mother caught the disease as well, and was even given final rites a few days before she finally managed to kind of get over the hump of it. So at a very young age, she did almost lose like half her family and her mother to an epidemic that just wiped out. It actually killed Maria Theresa's oldest son and his son's first wife, and I think his second wife, but I might be wrong about the second wife.
And the dog and the cat and the goldfish too.
My goldfish Goldie eaten by the cat. The cat choked on the goldfish. Ah, Marie Antoinette, ain't it great to be home? I think that's fucking hilarious. So, in 1768, she got a new tutor, sent by Louis XV to tutor her in order to become the best wife possible to Louis XVI. This tutor found her to be generally lacking and unsatisfactorily educated at the age of 13, and found that she really did not have important writing skills, nor just about anything else. But he said that she had a good heart and a good character, that those were excellent. And although she is lazy and frivolous and hard to teach, she's more intelligent than generally supposed. which can only makes me imagine that the rumors being told about her when she was she is 13, and it has already gotten around to the other courts in Europe, and they think that she's, in words that they would say back then, a little slow. And it doesn't appear that she truly was. She just wasn't interested in learning about court-related things or involving herself in things that she didn't enjoy, because she did well in music, and she seems to have enjoyed music. So maybe she just wasn't very motivated.
Maybe that's just what she was supposed to do, was music and not
everything
else.
Yeah, so, okay, by the time she was 13, it had already been decided who she was going to marry. It had likely been decided several years before that, because Maria Theresa, basically, as soon as she popped out her youngest kid, she started planning political marriages. She mapped out the marriage of every single one of her children into different houses in Europe, and if one of her kids died, the next one in line took their place. For example, when her older sister Maria Josepha, who was supposed to marry Ferdinand IV, died, the next living sister, Carolina, took her place and was sent off to marry Ferdinand in Naples. So it seems that she would just kind of move them down the list if a kid died. You know, she just moved to the next girl, send her off to that man, and then move the next man down to the next girl.
Honestly, for creating a huge amount of political influence, very, very intelligent woman right there. But also, let's be real here, she chose one of the worst times to possibly actually work on doing that.
Yeah, it was not a great time.
Not if you're trying to spread monarchical influence.
Yeah. So, the Duc de Choiseul, who was a supporter of her marriage, thought that she needed to, at the age of 13, thought that she needed a makeover so that she looked more like French royals. This meant that they took her to a French dentist and had them manually straighten her teeth, which could not have been pleasant in the 1700s. They changed up her entire wardrobe and gave her hairstyles that looked like those worn by Madame de Pompadour. And then she was taught to walk in the way that those at the court of Versailles walked, so that she fell more in line with French sort of fashion and court visibility, which I personally think is incredibly frivolous. I mean, like, if you're gonna come at someone for wasting money on something, it's that. What the fuck? Don't do that. Don't do that. So the reason why Maria Theresa had decided to marry her youngest child to Louis XV's son is because the 7 Years' War had ended with the diplomatic revolution of 1756. Maria Theresa did not want to continue hostilities with Louis XV. It was not really productive, and they shared a common desire. Can you tell me what that common desire was? To destroy Great Britain and Prussia and crush their ambitions.
Hell yeah. Fuck the British.
Hey, yeah.
Look, this is the right time period for us to say that, too.
Yep. And so, as a result, Marie Antoinette, who at the time was known as Maria Antonia, Marie Antoinette renounced all of her rights to the Habsburg domains and was married by proxy to the Dauphin of France at Augustinian Church in Vienna, with her brother Archduke Ferdinand standing in for the Dauphin. These arranged marriages by proxy were actually quite common in royal marriages, because you would just send someone to say, I stand in for this king, you marry me, and by marrying me, you marry the king. So we are not married, you are married to the king, but you did not actually have to get married in a ceremony together. And it was sort of a way of, I mean, they could be broken, obviously, because they were marriages by proxy, but it was essentially just a stronger connection than just a betrothal contract or something of that matter. It was more set in stone. So just a little bit stronger way to hold on to that connection just in case something went wrong. On the 14th of May, she arrived at the edge of the Forest de Compiègne and arrived in French there, she arrived officially in France in this forest, received her new name, Marie Antoinette, and had a short wedding ceremony, just right there and then. And then in 1770, she would have a larger wedding ceremony at the Palace of Versailles, which ended in the ritual bedding. And the things people did in the past, and I can only imagine that something like this, like a tradition like the ritual bedding, and for those of you who do not know what the ritual bedding is and have never been to Versailles or a French palace to see this, essentially it is a giant room and there is a bed in the middle and a little gate around the edge of the bed, and you go in there with your partner and the entire court stands behind the gate and watches you. And they can shout encouragement or criticism, and they're eating and drinking, and you are expected to couple in front of them to prove that you did it and did it correctly. And I can only imagine that this is necessary because so many couples didn't like each other and wouldn't fuck. Wouldn't fuck because they were not sexual orientation compatible, right, and didn't want to, or in the case of some kings of Europe, so inbred that they physically could not complete the act.
Everyone with a really, really shitty brother, imagine if your shitty brother could look over you as you're making love to your wife and mock your penis size in the middle of court.
For the first time, usually to a woman you've never met.
Yep.
It's, quite frankly, a lot more public than some of the other similar customs, because there are somewhat similar customs in other parts of Europe. There's the taking of the sheet to make sure it has blood on it, or the listening outside the door, but this is straight on watching with commentary.
I wonder if that's where the rumor, because weren't there rumors about King Louis XVI not being able to...
Yeah, but once again, it could be inbreeding too. Unfortunately, Marie Antoinette and Louis XVI were actually unable to consummate the marriage that night, and this caused tension and distress in both the royal family and the royal couple, something that would plague them for 7 years. It just became a thing that was wrong with them. And of course, the person at fault here is Marie Antoinette. By the rules of the time, it was Marie Antoinette that was at fault. It was just that she was not doing it right, something like that. It's very, very rarely ever blamed on the man. Historically, it's usually blamed on the woman. But then again, for a long time, they thought that they shot little miniature babies out, and then they would just grow into bigger babies. So science, progress, thank God. So, initially, as the Dauphine, she was quite well liked. She was beautiful, she seemed friendly, and her first official appearance in 1773 to the public was a great success. Unfortunately, at court, many nobles opposed the idea of allying with Austria, and so a lot of their nobles had a difficult relationship with her. And there were some others at court who just disliked her for kind of more personal and petty reasons. Maybe they felt one of their children should have been married to the Dauphin, and so on. Just any reason they could to dislike her. She was not well liked at court. Interestingly enough, one of her most interesting foes was the Madame du Barry, who was also known as Jean Bécu, who was the last maîtresse en titre of Louis XV of France, who would also be executed by guillotine eventually during the Revolution. And just so you know, maîtresse en titre is the officially recognized chief royal mistress of the King of France, and has been an acknowledged office that can be held since the reign of Henry IV, which was in 1500s. So for the last 250-ish years, this has been an official position that women can hold. And it's actually quite a powerful position, because you have to think, in a lot of royal marriages, do you know who has the most favor with the king? It is not his wife. It is his mistress and his male sons. So this is essentially the most powerful position at court, because if your husband needs a mistress en titre, he does not have a good relationship with his wife, which means his wife does not have that much power, unless she comes from a family that is equally powerful.
Sounds like a book series we're reading.
I plead the fifth. Interestingly, Madame du Barry, most notably in her opposal of Marie Antoinette, in 1770 was one of the people who was pretty instrumental in getting rid of that Duc de Choiseul, who had supported the marriage of Marie Antoinette and Louis XVI, and then exiled his sister, who was one of Marie Antoinette's ladies in waiting at the time. So that, like, she literally just removed part of her support base in one quick movement. Marie Antoinette's mother and the Comte de Mercy-Argenteau, who was the Austrian ambassador to France at the time, pressured Marie Antoinette to speak with her and to make a sort of an overture, right? So Marie Antoinette, at the New Year's Day event in 1772, spoke to her, and it's said that all she said was, "There are a lot of people at Versailles today," but just the acknowledgement from the future queen was enough to satisfy Madame du Barry, who just wanted her to acknowledge her power and position at court. Which, court intrigue is really interesting in my opinion. It's not something I would choose to study because it just makes me irrationally angry most of the time. But for fun, reading about it is fascinating because in reality, so much of the power at court is historically held by women because the women are the ones who are able to more easily run around behind the scenes than men. Like, men are much more watched historically, and in general, because men are viewed as the people who do things, their actions are much more scrutinized than women, who are typically perceived as people who have things done to them, depending on the situation. I mean, unless you can really spin it that the woman seduced you instead of you fucking someone else's wife. That's like the one position where a woman might end up worse off than a man, is if the man manages to convince people that she's the one who seduced him, rather than the other way around. But in general, it's easier for women to manipulate and control inside the court because they're a little bit less scrutinized in terms of political movement. Unfortunately, and well, fortunately for Marie Antoinette, Louis XV died in 1774, and 2 days after this, Louis XVI exiled her to Abbaye de Pont-aux-Dames in Meaux to please his wife and his aunts, who did not like her. So, good for Marie Antoinette, bad for Madame du Barry. Unfortunately, 2.5 years later, at the end of 1776, her exile ended. She was allowed to return to the Louveciennes, but never to Versailles. And honestly, if she'd stayed in exile, she probably would have survived the revolution. The fact that she was allowed to return to French high society is probably what ended up with her head getting cut off. So, 1774, Louis XV dies, and that makes Marie Antoinette the Queen of France and Navarre, a position she would maintain and remain in until 1792, for reasons many of you, I'm sure, are well aware of. And we'll get there when we get there. Unfortunately, at the very start of Louis XVI's reign, Marie Antoinette did not have a large political presence at court. She was pretty limited because she didn't know a lot of people, and honestly, her husband's most important ministers, Maurepas and Foreign Minister Vergennes, blocked a bunch of her candidate suggestions from taking important positions, including the reinstatement of Choiseul, the Duc de Choiseul, who had helped her. They did not let him rejoin sort of the higher rankings of court. The only thing that the Queen did manage to play a role in at this point was the exile of Duc d'Aiguillon, or Aiguillon. Duc d'Aiguillon. Which, good for her. I mean, political moves are a sign of success in reality. If you look at court life, any successful political move is a sign of a success in that particular situation. So if your name is associated with it, good for you, in my opinion. You managed to backstab before someone backstabbed you. 10 out of 10. And in a lot of ways, I think routine sort of backstabbing and political machinations are not something that need to be reviled. Like, there is a certain level of 24/7, everyday political machinations that happen in every imperial court during this period, and you need to just accept that somebody's always going to be plotting. No one is ever not going to be plotting or not involved in any plot whatsoever, be it a relatively harmless one or a very harmful one. And so, you don't need to revile her because she was involved in the ousting of this minister, because other women were involved in the ousting of other ministers, or her husband exiled several people, and we don't revile them for those actions.
Good God, it really is like if you handed the Twitch live streaming community control of the country.
Don't you love the French? So, 2 weeks after his father died, Louis XVI gave her the Petit Trianon, which was a small chateau on the grounds of Versailles that was built by Louis XV for Madame de Pompadour. At this time, he allowed her to renovate it, and unfortunately, I would assume someone in court started these rumors, but rumors began to spread that her idea of redecorating was to panel the walls with gold and diamonds in every room. And you can see why that would maybe be the start of not being well received in terms of her spending. She was known to spend heavily on fashion, luxuries, and gambling, of which she was a huge fan. Most of her dresses were created by Marie-Jeanne or Rose Bertin, who was a fashion merchant, and is generally credited as having brought haute couture to the forefront of popular culture. So she's basically the person who created and brought to the forefront the idea of expensive high fashion worn by rich people. Good and bad. We have haute couture today. I don't think it worked out well for Marie Antoinette, on top of all the other vices that she was rumored and known to have, and the money that she spent. And that is something that we can historically track, because the palaces kept records of sort of the queen's allowance, the king's allowance, household budgets, because the queen and the king would have a separate household. You know about royal households? Like the idea of them?
More or less.
Yeah, so basically, king and queen both have a separate royal household. Their household consists of all of their maids, their ladies in waiting, or the men who serve them, all of the servants that serve them directly, from the top to the bottom, and they're given sort of a yearly budget that they have for their household that is meant to provide for everything within that, from the lord or lady, or king or queen in this case, from their food and fashion to the paying of their own servants. And those budgets are tracked by the palace. And not a great look if you're out here spending like 3 times what anyone else is, or something ridiculous like that, regardless. It's said that some of her hairstyles were up to 3 feet tall and would include sprays of feather plumes. And she and her court insisted on adopting the English fashion of idienne, which was a material banned in France until 1759. And do you know why it was banned? It was banned to protect French woolen and silk industry. So the idea was they had banned the import of this British fabric to stimulate the French economy and to give work to French clothing makers.
Oh, hi, Loki.
Percale and muslin as well. And so, yes, she is the queen of one of what's known to be the most fashion-forward courts in the entirety of history. And, of course, she was more kitted out than anyone else there.
But ain't no one's calling her the queen of labor rights.
Obviously not. And during this entire time when she is the queen, France is facing economic like destruction, essentially. There is a massive financial crisis. The common people are suffering incredibly. And yes, you are supposed to look royal and you are supposed to show that you are royal and not a commoner, but you don't need to be actively promoting the importation of fabrics that put your own people out of high-end work. If, like, to be honest, her reputation would have been so much better if she had just given her patronage to French fabric makers making similar fabrics to Etienne. Like, the people would have been so happy with her if she had just given the money she was spending back into the French economy rather than buying luxury imports from their historical enemies, Britain.
Fuck the British.
She wasn't even British. Her mother also did not like Britain. And yet she still, I mean, I know that she wasn't, essentially all that we've been told about her is that even though she was educated, she didn't take to her education well, but I feel like she still should have had the social awareness to know that purchasing from the country that her mother forged an alliance using her with to take on, in terms of being enemies, was maybe not a great move. I'm sure Etienne was lovely, but was it that lovely? Like, this is one thing where I genuinely wonder, did she not know or not care? Did she even properly know how much financial trouble that the country was in? Because that's the other question. How much would she have been told if she wasn't super popular at court? And obviously she's always secondary to her husband, especially matters of like financials. Women are typically not the one trusted. How much did she know? Did she know and actively choose to continue importing luxury goods? Or did she not really know how bad it was?
To me, it just sounds like she had no sense of, like, political awareness, and people were just enabling her.
I mean, she did have to be given a household budget. So, and if she overspent it, somebody was obviously authorizing that. Did they reprimand her? Did they tell her she was overspending?
Let's not forget, she wasn't the one to have the sole power to unban that stuff in France.
Exactly. It was unbanned in 1759. That was before she even married in.
Yeah.
So technically the import was legal, but something that had been banned for so long, you can understand why, that's something that the people could look at and go, oh, look, she's buying in British Etienne rather than buying our own produced Etienne and spending, look at how much she's spending on it, I really wonder sometimes just how much was she fully and comprehensionally aware of. Because she was young and she might not have been. I don't want to excuse her. She definitely was spending in excess and luxuries, gambling, like all of that. But I don't know. I would put my money on that she did not know exactly what the country was going through. Like, she just did not comprehend the full scope.
We already know that she was not educationally gifted.
Yeah, like, she struggled, and honestly, the way it sounds to me is she chose not to invest her time in learning sort of technical stuff. She preferred to spend time on things she enjoyed, and I can see how fashion and music would be much more enjoyable than economics and financials. I hated my high school economics class. Good Lord, that was like the worst 2 months of my life. I know it wasn't for you. You probably enjoyed it, you weirdo. But I hated it. I thought it was the worst.
But we had a lot of people there we knew.
That's true. I did have a good class.
It was a great community.
Yeah. Teacher was great. However, throughout all this time, yeah, she's reigning this fashionable court, spending all this money. She was quite charismatic. Like, that cannot be understated enough. Marie Antoinette was a charismatic figure. People who met and talked to her often liked her, at least in some way, or really, understood that she wasn't I think they understood that she wasn't trying to be malicious, at the very least. So she was well received by people who interacted with her.
But unfortunately, you can only make bullshit checks so many times before you start turning up fails.
Yeah, well, in 1775, There was the Flour War. Have you heard of the Flour
No.
Wars? Okay, so the price of flour and bread had grown so high that the people rioted in the streets that year. And unfortunately, because of her spending, her reputation, you would think she would have hit rock bottom. No, there was a place to go below rock bottom. There was a basement. Rock bottom had a basement, and she found it during this period because of her spending. The French decided to blame her for the degrading economic situation, saying that the country couldn't pay off its debt because she was wasting the crown's money on all these expenditures. In correspondences, Maria Theresa expressed to her daughter that she needed to spend less. And very obviously that did not happen, as we can see. In fact, as early and to kind of contribute to the reason why people stopped liking her was that as early as late 1774, it became public knowledge that she had befriended some male admirers of her at court. The Baron de Besenval, the Duc de Coigny, and the Count Valentine Esterhazy, who had formed deep friendships with her and other ladies at court. So that's not great. You do not want the people to know that you have close friends with men who are not your husband who admire you, because that's seen as a seductress grasping for power.
I don't know that she had the political sense to be a seductress grasping for power.
But it's what it would be seen as.
No, you're right.
Yep. She formed friendships at the time with some ladies at court. For example, Marie-Louise, the Princess de Lambaye, who was related to the royal family through marriage. And she had appointed her in 1774 superintendent to her household, but very quickly after just transferred that position to her new favorite, the Duchesse de Polignac. And eventually she would also undertake the patronage of her former music teacher, who she would essentially pay for all of his expenses as his patron for the next 5 years. And that's another expensive thing. These are all members of her household she's having to pay. So, in the 1770s, you know what was popular in France? Political pamphlets called the libelles. Yeah. We're just gonna leave that there.
Politics.
Yep. Because the printing press and free speech. So, in 1777, her brother, who was at the time Joseph II, the Holy Roman Emperor, came to France using the name Comte de Falkenstein for a 6-week visit. Touring Paris and being a guest at Versailles, he met his sister and her husband at the Château de la Muette, spoke with his brother-in-law, and questioned why the royal marriage had not been consummated, and decided, based on the conclusion, that there was no obstacle except for his sister's lack of interest and his brother-in-law's unwillingness to exert himself in any way to do anything about the situation. She doesn't want to, and he's not going to force her, essentially, because he's too lazy to do it, or just doesn't want to, is what he decided. And he wrote a letter to one of their brothers, Leopold, describing them as a couple of blunderers. Not a very high opinion of either of them. At the time, Louis XVI was still only 22, and he'd confided in Joseph II about what they did in the marital bed, and we actually have what he wrote to his brother Leopold about this. And apparently Louis XVI thought that what needed to be done in bed was he would insert himself, sit there for 1 to 2 minutes, and then remove himself and leave without moving once he had inserted himself.
They're perfect for each other. They're both stupid.
What? See, for a long time, historians thought that he might have suffered from phimosis, which was related to which was then relieved by circumcision, because phimosis would have made it extremely painful for him to be inserted and to move while inserted, which might have been a reason why he wouldn't have been willing. Unfortunately, that has been discredited. So, yeah.
And this is why sex ed is important.
They did successfully consummate the marriage in 1777, a few months later. And 8 months later, it was expected that she was pregnant, and her first daughter, Maria Therese Charlotte, the Madame Royale, was born at Versailles. However, the Labelles contested the paternity of her daughter and all of her other children, likely because of all the rumors about the two of them not consummating their marriage for 7 years. So really, that really came back to bite y'all in the butt, didn't it? I told you it would come back to bite them in the butt. I also told you those libels would be back.
Remember, he had to be stupid enough to think that's how it worked, and she had to be stupid enough not to tell him otherwise.
I mean, I just... So, interestingly enough, during her pregnancy, 2 things happened that would matter. One of her friends, who was a Swedish diplomat, Count Axel von Fersen, the younger, returned to court for 2 years. And her brother's claim to the throne of Bavaria was contested by the monarchy and Prussia. Marie Antoinette wanted Louis to intercede on behalf of Austria, and in 1779 they signed the Peace of T.H.E, with the Queen imposing French mediation at her mother's insistence, and Austria gaining a territory of Inviertel, which had a fair amount of inhabitants, which unfortunately, because of a retreat from the early French position, was hostile to Austria at the time, which gave the impression that the Queen had sided with Austria against France in this matter. And she was supposed to have renounced all of her ties to Austria and be only the Queen of France. And then she decided to change things up at court. And the changes she made were not liked by the conservative older generation, because she wanted them to abandon heavy makeup and wide-hooped panniers, calling for a simpler look. The robe à la polonaise, which was sort of inspired by rustic peasant wear, like the something that you would wear under your clothes, but made extravagantly enough to wear outside of your clothes. I think Wikipedia has a picture. So think about this, right? So this is the clothing she's wearing for like the first part of her reign, right? Like this is extremely extravagant. There's a ton of detail on this. I mean, look at, sort of the jeweling. But then, like I said, that's full court wear. So the panier is the really wide skirt on the sides. It's basically a giant sort of trapezoid of skirt. And at the time in France, the fashion was the wider the panier, the better. So there are examples of paniers in museums where they are 3 feet off either side of your hip. Right? So that is extravagance, right? So robe à la polonaise. Simpler, but still made to be expensive. Right? So this is the things you would wear under your clothes, worn outside. Which, I'm going to be, and the lack of heavy makeup and the simpler look, I'm going to be honest, not a horrible thing to pivot towards if you want to look like you're spending less money.
Yeah, actually.
I mean, that is significantly cheaper to make than a panier.
Unfortunately, if there's one thing you don't want to do in politics, it's simultaneously piss off both the conservatives and the liberals.
Yeah. Unfortunately. Within a year or so, she had also begun to participate in plays and musicals hosted in the Théâtre de la Reine, or the Theatre of the Queen, that was built for her. And if you want to convince the populace that you are not spending in excess, maybe do not have a theater built for you to put on amateur performances. I'm just saying. My personal visit. My personal opinion.
Once again, though, we see that she yearned for art, for the arts.
Yes. So French debt was still not being repaid. Ironically, remember that man that tried that blocked her earlier, one of Louis XVI's ministers, Vergennes, right? So, to be honest, he's a pretty big contributor to why the debt was not repaid, because he was one of the leading ministers. And so, between him and the Marie Antoinette and some other factors, the debt was just not being repaid. And Louis the 16th wanted to involve France in the American Revolutionary War. Hey guys, contemporary world events. Honestly, a lot of historians believe that political affairs that the Queen was involved with during this period probably had more to do with court factionalism than her being interested in politics. Like, she likely had no real stake in it, but she had friends and followers who were on one side or the other, and therefore her name would be associated with different political moves and groups. But she did play an important part in aiding the American Revolution, because she was the one who wrote to Austria and Russia, securing their support for France, establishing the First League of Armed Neutrality, stopping Britain's attack, and nominated Philippe Henri, the Marquis de Ségur, as the Minister of War, as well as Charles Eugène Gabriel Delacroix as Secretary of the Navy, he himself helped George Washington defeat the British in the Revolutionary War. So, while she was not largely thought to have been interested in most court politics, she is pretty much the main leading factor as to why the French aided the Americans in the American Revolutionary War. So we get to thank her for that. Unfortunately, in 1779, her second pregnancy ended in a miscarriage, confirmed by letters between her and her mother. And less than 2 years later, her third pregnancy was affirmed, and she would give birth to Louis-Joseph Xavier François, the Dauphin of France, her first son. The year before, Maria Theresa had died in Vienna, and Antoinette was really afraid that this was going to fuck with the Franco-Austrian alliance. Although her brother at the time, Joseph II, did write to her and say he had no intentions of breaking this alliance. And he visited in 1781 to reaffirm it and see his sister, but the visit was tainted because somebody spread the rumor that she was sending money to him from the French treasury directly to support him. So remember I said, like, a lot of the court when she came in didn't like her because she was an Austrian? That sort of really pervaded her history. And she would just always be looked at as the Austrian queen. And any time that she had any contact with Austria, essentially they would just go, oh, she's siding with Austria. Like, she's not siding with France. She's siding with Austria. So that's not a great look. To be honest, she probably would have done better if she'd cut ties almost entirely, but she didn't, and I don't blame her for that. So throughout the middle of the 1780s, she pretty much, her popularity hit rock bottom. She birthed an heir and people were happy, but largely the people thought that her political influence was being used to benefit Austria and not France. And unfortunately, she did not aid this because during the Kettle War, she got Vergennes to pay a huge amount of financial compensation to Austria. Eventually, she was able to get her brother's support against Great Britain in the American Revolution, right, aiding and neutralizing, but it didn't go great, right? For her, sending money to Austria and to America and never to France, while the French debts were still unpaid. In 1782, the governess of the royal children, the Princess de Guémen, went bankrupt, and she decided to appoint her favorite, the lady who was in charge of her household, the Duchess de Polignac, to the position of royal governess. This, honestly, the court did not like this. She was considered to be too modest to occupy such a position. And even though the court just entirely did not like this, the king and the queen trusted her and gave her a 13-room apartment in Versailles and paid for her and her household, which was now separate. The entire Polignac family benefited from this. But because of this sudden benefit, they turned it into a really wealthy and lavish lifestyle immediately, and that just made the aristocratic families rabidly angry because they resented the Polignacs' dominance at court, and they generally just considered this to be Marie Antoinette's fault. One woman wrote to the Empress, "It is almost unexampled that in so short a time the royal favor should have brought such overwhelming advantages to one family. Like, you have single-handedly, in the space of a year, lifted this family from one social station up 10. And that's just unheard of. And they did not like that. Later that year, just after she'd given birth to her son, she had a new pregnancy announced, but almost immediately suffered a miscarriage just a few months later. Unfortunately, in her electing of political figures that were not smart to elect, she continued that in getting the nomination of Charles Alexandre de Calonne, who was a family friend of the Polignacs, as the controller of finances, and the Baron de Breteuil as minister of the royal household. You can see why the support of the queen, who's being looked at as a huge spender and someone wasting the country's money, appointing the person overseeing both the royal households and the treasury, was maybe not a good political decision. You want to, she needed to keep herself as far away from the financial side of things as she could, and she abjectly did not. And here's the thing. I don't think she deserves to be demonized for this. I think she was young and did not take advantage of her educational opportunities and thus was sort of willingly oblivious, but I don't think that means she was malignant. Do you know what I mean? I don't think she was being deliberately malignant and obtuse. I think it was incidental, which is why I really feel like innocent monster could be applied here.
I will give you some pushbacks. I don't think she has it, but I think the problem with innocent monster there is, while it is true what happened, her exact her exact problems are greatly exaggerated and overblown when compared to the rest of the court, and her role and everything was probably grossly overblown. She wasn't exactly fully innocent. She was still extravagantly spending, and you do have documented cases where there's I want to put gold and silver in the palace walls.
But we don't know if she did. That was a rumor.
Oh, that part was rumor.
It was a rumor. We don't know if she did. It was just the rumor that was spread about her.
But we do know her general spending habits.
I mean, yeah, she spent a lot. This woman spent a lot of money. A, quite frankly, astounding amount of money. So, Marie Antoinette's influence, because of these two appointments of hers, became massive. Her new ministers rejected any major change to the structure, and decree by the Minister of War required the 4/4 of nobility as a condition for the appointment of officers, which really only served older family interests, including the poorer, which served the interests of older noble families, which included the poorer and provincial ones, which were often seen as reactionary groups by ambitious members of the middle and professional classes. The measures that they put in place also blocked the access of commoners and those of recently elevated nobility to take up any important positions. And honestly, it just really became a grievance for the social classes that had been supportive of the monarchy and the established order, which was those who were, or used to be able to move themselves up through wealth accumulation. They now could accumulate wealth, but they could not move themselves up in society. Does that sound like any other empire that we've talked about on this channel before, Nick Nack? Which one?
I don't know.
Tokugawa Japan. The merchants
That's
becoming
right.
richer, the nobles going into debt, the inability of them to move up the classes because of the strict social order. And look how well that worked for the Tokugawa. So remember how her friend Count Axel von Fersen had joined the court for 2 years? Well, he went off to the American Revolution. And then when he came back, he was brought into the Queen's private society, and rumors flew that they were romantically involved. Although there's no actual conclusive evidence of that today. Although grain of salt, because this was a Telegraph article, and I did not have time to read the full academic article published on this. In 2016, there was some work done deciphering letters that had been destroyed or faded too much to read, that they claimed proved that the affair was happening. I said I did not have time to go through that academic article like in its full entirety, but keep that in mind.
This one actually could have held.
Remember those libelles? The pamphlets? Yeah. Oh, yeah. Guess what the Queen and her friends were into? Sexual deviance. The Portefeuille en Talon Rouge was one of the earliest, which just decried the immoral practices at court. And as these libelles came out, they became more and more focused on the Queen. It said that she had encounters of the sort with the Duchesse de Polignac, Louis XV, her father, almost anyone at court. The public did not like this. Rumors really matter when you are a queen and so out of reach of the common people that all they hear about you is rumor. They just, essentially, it became publicly known to commoners that all of this licentious behavior was because she had grown up in a German court, because lesbianism was a German vice, and she was a lesbian deviant. Her mother actually at this point had taken to monitoring her movements and having reports sent to her. Just to see if she was actually doing this. Right? This was like the year her mother died, where there was these reports coming out about her sexual deviance with apparently everyone at court. So remember, you wouldn't remember, we haven't done Catherine the Great as a servant because Catherine the Great is not a servant. Okay, so Marie Antoinette and Catherine the Great have a few things in common, and one of them is that Marie Antoinette decided in the 1780s that what she wanted to do was build a little fake peasant village on the grounds of the castle, which was popular at the time. It was not an eccentricity of Marie Antoinette, right? Catherine the Great did it too, but essentially they had artists and architects, and they commissioned them to build an idealized and picturesque peasant village on the grounds of their estates, and then occupy them with people who would just reenact life in peasant villages for them to wander around in
actors,
picturesque settings. So, I mean, that's a massive expense. That's something that gets out. You've spent millions on that. She also amassed a massive library, predominantly of things like music and history. Apparently, she really enjoyed reading music and history and was a huge patron of the arts. She held musicals in the salon of her Appartement de la Reine in the Paris of Versailles and in the Théâtre de la Reine. She limited the audience to her intimate circle and just a few musicians. Which is honestly unfortunate. However, and I'm really trying to point out the good things here, she really loved the idea of supporting scientific innovation, encouraging and witnessing the firsts of many things. She saw the launch of the Montgolfier, which was the first hot air balloon, which was just a turning point in human civilization, like point blank period. Like, if we're talking about things that changed history, the first hot air balloon. Because hot air balloons would eventually lead to zeppelins. Zeppelins would lead to airplanes. Like this is a direct shot to air travel. And what has changed the face of our world more than air travel? Almost nothing. I mean, the idea that we're able to get almost instantaneously from one place to another, shocking. So, in 1784, there was a play called The Marriage of Figaro. It premiered in Paris, And it was initially banned by the king because of its depiction of nobility, which was highly negative. But the queen actually supported it. And actually, through her actions, it was allowed to be publicly performed. It was a disaster for the image of the monarchy. It was awful, and it was one of the works that inspired Mozart's Les Noces de Figaro, which premiered in Vienna just a few years later. They looked so bad from this. She literally supported something that dragged her own reputation through the mud and pointed out all the flaws of monarchy.
But once again,
art.
Really liking the arts here.
Yeah. I mean, if she had lived 100 years earlier, she probably would have been sainted as a patron of the arts.
Yeah.
You know? Because that's the one thing that females in nobility do, is they patrons of the arts.
Like a patron of the sciences and the arts.
Yeah. Yeah. That's like one of the best things you can be called as a female noble.
Unfortunately, there's economic crisis going on right now.
Yeah, and unfortunately she was less of a patron, I approve, you can put the royal seal, and more of a patron, play it for me and I'll pay you a lot of money. So, you know, maybe reevaluate her, sort of the type of patronage she was offering was something that needed to happen.
She was also anti-censorship, evidently.
Yeah. So in 1784... Louis XVI bought the Chateau de Saint-Cloud from the Duc d'Orléans at the time in the name of his wife, which she wanted because of their expanding family of 2 whole kids and a third one on the way. She wanted to own her own property, one that was hers, and be able to bequeath it to whichever of her children that she wished, choosing a child that could use it rather than going through traditional patriarchal inheritance laws. It was proposed by some that the cost of buying the chateau could be covered by selling the Chateau Trompé in Bordeaux, but this was pretty unpopular because the nobles and the general population disapproved of a Queen of France independently owning a private property. Unfortunately, they went through with this with this sort of purchase, and the price was almost 6 million livres, which also she then redecorated. And so all that money came from the royal coffers and went towards buying a chateau and not paying off the substantial debt that France was in at the time. She did at this point, a year after this, give birth to a second son, Louis Charles, who bore the title Duc de Normandie. Remember those libelles? That's a phrase I'm going to be saying a lot. So her child was born exactly 9 months after Count Fersen returned from America and was indicted into her personal private society, her friend. Yeah. So, no. Just Rock Bottom's basement had a basement. This was that basement. Like, we're slowly digging a tunnel to hell here with the people's perception of her. Like, honestly... Biographers do actually believe that this was the biological son of Louis XVI, but it didn't matter. Like literally the dates of the kid's birth match up perfectly to a recorded conjugal visit from King Louis XVI. Doesn't matter. The rumor was that it was Fersen, and so the people believed that it was Fersen, so they believed that she was having an affair. And remember, her deviant ways are because she's German, not French.
Those Germans.
I love certain parts of, like, European history. They're great.
European on European racism is fucking glorious.
I know. It's beautiful. So, have you heard of the affair of the diamond necklace?
No. Wait, I think I might have, but go ahead and refresh me.
So, the Affaire du Collier de la Reine, or the Affair of the Queen's Necklace, happened in 1784-1785. And it was something that was just awful. So, she was accused of defrauding the crown's jewelers by acquiring an expensive diamond necklace and rejecting paying for it. In reality, what had happened was she had decided not to buy it, and then Jean Valois Saint-Remy forged her signature on the purchase order. And so let me show you a picture of this necklace, because I know it's in here as its own separate thing. Okay. Look at this. Look at the size of this. This is all diamonds. Knick-knack. This is huge.
Is that a recreation or is that the original?
This is a recreation. Yeah.
Something like that made of diamonds survives to this day would really shock me, especially if it was considered pretty unpopular at the time.
Yeah, I don't...
Especially when there was an uprising and revolt against the people who made it.
Yeah. No, it is... I mean, it was massive. Like, this thing was humongous. And, like, that many diamonds. Yeah, so the affair of the diamond necklace, it was awful. I mean, this just ruined her in the eyes of the people. So here's the backstory of the necklace. The necklace was made by Louis XV, her father-in-law, for Madame du Barry, the Mistress de la Titre. In 2021, the necklace would have cost $15.1 million.
So a drop in the bucket for Elon Musk.
Yeah. It took so long to make and acquire that many diamonds that Louis XV died of smallpox and Madame du Barry was banished from court before it was completed.
This one, though, is distinctly not Marie Antoinette's fault.
No. In fact, he was actually convicted. Like, the man who faked the sale, he was actually convicted, but history doesn't remember that, and the people at the time did not remember that he was convicted for this. They remembered that she bought a diamond necklace that was worth the equivalent then of $15 million.
It was like, this thing has been made. It wasn't supposed to be made in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
It cost a lot of money, but we have it now. What the fuck do we do with it? Let the queen wear it. That's pretty much what happened there, right?
No. Because she didn't want it.
Oh.
She it was offered to her and she said no, and then her signature was forged on the purchase order by this person. Like, this one is abjectly not her fault. Her father-in-law commissioned the damn thing for a mistress. He's at fault here. And let's get something straight. The economic situation in France is not her fault. She is compounding it. Yeah. But that issue started long before her.
There is very clearly overspending the nobility prior to her.
Abso-fucking-lutely. Anyways, in 1786, her last child and her second daughter, Maria Sophie Hélène Beatrix, was born. Madame Sophie. And she was named after the king's aunt, Princess Sophie of France, but she only lived 11 months, unfortunately, and died before her first birthday. So, after the birth and death of her last child, Marie Antoinette changed. She became more involved in politics and abandoned a lot of her more frivolous activities in order to support this new involvement in politics. She actually cared about the education of her children, and she tried to sort of fix the image left of her after the diamond necklace. So, because the people who participated in that scandal just involved a whole lot of other people, one of which was a descendant of an illegitimate child of Henry II of France of the House of Valois, who would have been sort of in line for the throne at some point had her husband not been on the throne. And unfortunately, this Prince de Rohan Guemen, she had disliked him ever since he was the French ambassador in Vienna when she was a child, and she just refused to acknowledge him in court ever. Interestingly enough, there was during the affair, there was actually a prostitute who happened to look like her participated in it, which is absolutely wild. Pretty much everyone involved in the affair was tried, convicted, and either imprisoned or exiled. So, but Marie Antoinette, one of the people was a cardinal, and she had insisted on the arrest of the cardinal, and that didn't go well for her. And honestly, even though she tried to improve her reputation afterwards, it never recovered from this. Because the thing is, the scandal spread further than the trial and conviction ever did. That's just how it is. Often the initial scandal is what people remember more so than the trial and conviction, especially when the trial takes place in a court that is primarily of high-class people who are not likely to be writing pamphlets about this kind of thing.
Well, I don't think much has changed to this day.
No, not at all. So at this point, her husband also became really depressed, like clinically depressed. And one of the things that he did was he tried to seek her advice in ruling their kingdom. She sort of began slowly increasing her political power, and she wanted to try to improve the situation between her husband, the king, and Parliament. Ironically, this would actually signal the end of the Polignacs' influence and their impact on the finances at court. Unfortunately, even though there were deep cutbacks to the royal retinue and court expenses, the deterioration of the financial situation continued, and it forced the king, the queen, and the minister of France at the time, Calonne, to call the Assembly of Notables, which had not been called for 160 years. Now, the Assembly of Notables was essentially a group of the highest-ranking nobles, ecclesiastics, and state functionaries that were just convened on exceptionally extraordinary occasions and meant to assist and consult on members of state. Essentially, the king was calling all high-placed men in France to come and advise him on what could be done to improve the situation of the deterioration of the economy and the perception of the French royal family, which I think is incredibly smart and should have been done earlier than it was. So the idea of the assembly, in the way that he called it, was that they wanted to input financial reforms. Unfortunately, the assembly just refused to cooperate. The first meeting took place in 1787. Marie Antoinette did not attend, and this resulted in accusations that she was undermining its process. The assembly was a complete failure. They did not pass any reforms and decided to defy the king. And then on the urging of the queen, he would dismiss Minister Calonne in 1787. At that point, the Controller General of Finances, Calonne, was replaced by Etienne Charles de Lomaine de Brienne, who was the Archbishop of Toulouse and a political ally of the Queen. He was then, and after that, he was appointed as chief minister. He instituted cutbacks at court, but also tried to restore the royal absolute power by weakening the parliament. Unfortunately, he was not able to overall improve the financial situation, and his inability to do that adversely affected Marie Antoinette's political position because he had been supported by her. This resulted in a dissolution of the Assembly of Notables because it literally lacked the ability to function as intended, and they blamed their entire lack of solutions directly on the Queen. The entire assembly did. A bunch of men brought in to advise the king and queen just said, "We give up, it's her fault." Even though at this point she was actively trying to participate in cutbacks and improve her own reputation. So honestly, that's on them. Fucking pussies. Sorry, that makes me so mad. So we've talked about France's financial issues a few times, but let's get started. So France was suffering because they did have a large royal family with massive expenditures paid for by the state. But they had also undertaken several very expensive wars in the preceding century, and most members of the privileged class aristocracy and clergy refused to aid the government in paying any of this by relinquishing some of their financial privileges, even though the crown had asked several times. As a result, but, that's not what gets out to the public. As a result of pamphlets and this horrible reputation, Marie Antoinette was nicknamed Madame Deficit. Madame Deficit.
Can you hear that, Sekhie?
What?
Can you hear the people sing?
Singing a song of angry men. Unfortunately, while the financial crisis was not at all, the cause of it was not at all at her feet, she was a major obstacle to reform. She had played a role in the disgrace of the former reformer Minister of Finance, Turgot, and Necker. And if you counted her secret expenses, the court expenses were much higher than what the estimate of the state budget which was 7%. So she was spending much more than what the court estimated the royal family should be spending, unfortunately, at this point. Her attempt to fight back mostly consisted of propaganda that portrayed her as a caring mother and showed her with her children. Because she felt that this was really a way, because that is a way for women to claim a level of power and respect, is to be a good mother figure, to raise your children in the correct way. However, Jean de Valois, involved in the Diamond Affair, right, escaped prison in 1787, fled to London, and published a ton of pamphlets of slander about her supposed amorous lesbian affair with the Queen. In 1787, the political situation was just getting so much worse. Marie Antoinette had urged the Parliament to be exiled in August, and then Louis XVI tried to use a lit de justice, which was a formal session of the Parliament of Paris, which would make compulsory the registration of royal edicts. That was bad. That was not good. People did not like this. He issued the May edicts, and they were vastly opposed by public and Parliament, and notable figures like the Duc d'Orléans publicly protested this and were exiled. Just a few months later, he announced his intention to bring back the Estates General, which was the traditional elected legislature of the country, which had not been convened since 1614. 1614. They had not convened their elected legislature in almost 200 years. That just makes me irrationally angry. So, the Estates General. Do you know the 3 estates of the Estates General?
No, I do not.
Cool. So there was the first estate, the clergy, the second estate, the nobility, and the third estate, which was the commoners and others. And it was tradition for the monarch to summon them to advise the crown and to either grant subsidies or give aid and counsel. So this is actually pretty good. You summon the church, you summon the nobles, you summon the common peoples, and you ask for their advice. You ask for their help. Do this more often, people.
I know.
Don't go 200 years.
If they'd done this sooner, maybe they wouldn't have simultaneously pissed off the nobility and the commoners.
Right? So, from 1787 up until 1789, her primary concern, Marie Antoinette's primary concern, was the deterioration of the health of the Dauphin, who had contracted tuberculosis. And keep in mind, this was their heir. They only had 2 sons. And he had tuberculosis. He died in 1789. That did not make people like her anymore. She was
there goes that caring mother.
Yeah, pretty much. She was the first queen in 117 years to participate in the King Council. The last person who did it was Marie de Medici. And she was one of the people making major decisions in the Royal Council. You don't want to be the first person to do, you don't want to be the first woman to do something in 170 years. Especially not when the last one was a Medici. Nope, you don't want to be doing that.
If you're going to take on that role, you need to do it when it's mostly a ceremonial time.
Yeah. So she did reinstate Necker, who she had previously helped uninstate in 1788, which was actually pretty popular, although she was worried that, much like the last appointment she'd made, if he failed, it would go against her. So she accepted his proposition, which was to double the representation of the Third Estate, which were the commoners, in an attempt to check the power of the aristocracy in the Estates General. So she said, let's just double the amount of commoners to be elected to this assembly so that we can check the aristocracy. That's great. 100%. Because I know that was not sitting at like an equal representation of the population. So, on the eve of the opening, the Queen attended the Mass celebrating its return. And, unfortunately, immediately, the fracture between the Democratic Third Estate and the conservative nobility of the Second Estate widened vastly. And Marie Antoinette was made to know that the Duc d'Orléans, who had publicly opposed them, had given money and bread to the people. He had decided to give money and bread to the people throughout the winter, and the crowd celebrated him instead of her. In June, her son died. Although the people of France didn't really care, she and her husband really did. They actually did deeply care about their son, and they were very sad that he died, and it really affected them. The French people cared more about the next meeting of the Estates General, which was to address the bread crisis. And the Third Estate declared itself National Assembly, took the tennis court oath, and people started to spread rumors that the Queen wanted to bathe in their blood. However, at this time, she was just in mourning for her son. I will say, though, she did urge her husband to not concede to public demand for reform, and did try to use her political force to crush the forthcoming revolution at this time. She was mourning her son. She was dealing with shit. Here's where I become an apologist. She should not have done that.
Here's where I don't. This is one of those moments where, like,
no, she fucked up.
This is definitely, like, she's innocent in a few things, or she's less guilty than people make her out to be in a few ways. This is one of the areas where she is absolutely still guilty.
Just a little bit, yeah. So the French Revolution, everyone. The Third Estate had been joined by members of the clergy and radical nobility, and they met at the tennis court in Versailles and took the tennis court oath not to separate the Third Estate and the Estates General until they had been given a constitution and reformed the nation. Necker at this point was dismissed by Marie Antoinette's urging and replaced once again by Bretteville, who she believed could crush the revolution with Swiss mercenary troops under the command of the Baron de Besenval de Brunstadt. Paris broke into riots because of this, and they stormed the Bastille. Remember, Bastille Day, boys. The Marquis de Lafayette. Lafayette was
That's
named,
a familiar name.
Yes, was named commander-in-chief of the newly formed Garde Nationale. In the days following this, out of fear of assassination ordered by the king, most of the members of high aristocracy began to leave the court, beginning with the Comte d'Artois and Condés, who were the cousins of the king, and the unpopular Polignacs. Marie, however, refused to leave and remained with the king, whose power, at this point, was being gradually, step by step, removed by the National Constituent Assembly, as they now called themselves. In 1789, they enacted the abolition of feudal privileges and the Declaration of the Rights of Man and the Citizen, La Déclaration des droits de l'homme et du citoyen, which we know very well ourselves as proud red-blooded Americans, as it was drafted with the help of Thomas Jefferson, and would then, some of its wording would be reused on our own Declaration of Independence. However, it became the pavement for the way to a constitutional monarchy, which would be enacted from 1791 to 1792. Life at court actually continued, despite all these changes, with the bread shortage in Paris becoming literally critical. Like, cut back at court! Do something! A crowd descended on Versailles, forcing the royal family to move into the Tuileries Palace in Paris, where they lived under house arrest under the watch of Lafayette's Garde Nationale, while the Comte de Provence and his wife were allowed to reside in the Petit Luxembourg, where they remained until they went into exile in 1791. Marie Antoinette continued to attend charitable functions and religious ceremonies, dedicating most of her time to her children at this point. She did play an important political but not public role between 1789 and 1791 because she developed a complex set of relationships with many of the figures of the early period of the French Revolution, primarily Necker, the Prime Minister of Finances. Despite her dislike of him, she did actually play a pretty active role in him returning to office, and eventually blamed him for his support of the revolution and did not regret it when he resigned in 1790. Lafayette served as a warden of the royal family as commander-in-chief, and despite his dislike of the queen, and they detested one another, at one time he even threatened to send her to a convent. The mayor of Paris at the time, Jean-Sylvain Bailly, persuaded him to work and collaborate with her, allowing her to meet with Count Fersen a number of times. He even went so far as exiling the Duke of Orleans, who was accused by the queen of causing trouble. His relationship with the king was more cordial than that of the queen. He was a liberal aristocrat, and so he did not want the fall of the monarchy, but he wanted an establishment of a more liberal monarchy, similarly to what had happened in Great Britain, based on a cooperation of king and people, which was to be defined in the currently being written Constitution of 1791. Unfortunately, despite staying mainly out of the public eye, you remember those Les Belles? So guess who Marie Antoinette was fucking? Lafayette! And as was published in what I think is the greatest name of a pamphlet ever. I'm going to say it in French and then tell you what it is in English. Le Godemiche Royal, the Royal Dildo, was accused of having a sexual relationship with the English Baroness Lady Sophie Farrell of Bournemouth, who was a well-known lesbian of the time.
Those sinful lesbians.
Fun fact, these pamphlets would directly lead to, at her trial, her being accused of incest with her son. I love French history. I love French history so much. I hate modern history, but I love royal history. It's great. So one thing she did do during this time was she actually established an alliance with the Comte de Mirabeau, who was a lawmaker in the assembly at the time. He was also a liberal aristocrat and had joined the Third Estate, but was not outwardly against the monarchy. He wanted to reconcile it with the revolution and a new constitution. He wanted to be a minister and was not immune to corruption and being paid off. On the advice of Mercy, she opened secret negotiations with him, and they agreed to meet privately at the Château de Saint-Cloud, the property that had been bought for her in 1790, where they were allowed to spend the summer free of radical elements. At the meeting, he was impressed by the queen. He said that she was the only person that the king had by him, and that she was interesting. I mean, he really thought that she was like politically interesting. Marie promised to pay him 6,000 livres per month and 1 million if he restored the king's authority. This man could be bought. During this period, the only time that they returned to Paris was on the 14th of July to attend the Fête de la Fédération, which was a ceremony to commemorate the fall of the Bastille a year earlier. 300,000 persons from all over France participated, including a huge section of the National Guard, the Bishop of Autun, and many other people. And the king was actually greeted with loud cheers of "Long live the king" when he took an oath to protect the nation and enforce all the laws voted on by the Constitutional Assembly. The people even cheered for the queen when she presented the new Dauphine to the public at this event. Mirabeau, her ally at the time, really wanted her to reconcile with the people, and she was happy to see him restoring some of the king's powers. He had been given back the idea of authority over foreign policy. He had been restored the right to declare war. And over the objections of Lafayette and some of his allies, he had been given a suspensive veto, allowing him to veto any laws for a period of 4 years if he did not agree with them. Mirabeau supported the queen even more, eventually suggesting that Louis XVI should adjourn to the Rouen or Compiègne and essentially leave her as the political force behind the throne. Yeah, but that didn't work out great, as you can probably tell by the revolution, because in 1791, he was killed. Yeah, did not go well. In 1791, the Pope at the time also condemned the civil constitution of the clergy, which had been reluctantly signed by Louis XVI, which manually reduced the number of bishops from 132 to 193 and imposed election of bishops and members of the clergy by departmental or district assemblies of electors, reducing the Pope's authority over the church, which he did not like. Religion was important to both the king and the queen, having been raised Roman Catholic, and her political ideas and absolute belief in the absolute power of monarchs were based around the French tradition of the divine right of kings. In April, they left to attend Easter Mass, and a crowd prevented them from leaving Paris, which ended in Marie Antoinette telling Lafayette that she and her family were no longer free, obviously, if they could not even leave Paris. The incident essentially made her more determined to leave Paris with her family, and her husband eventually started to agree with her, and they really felt that they needed to get the fuck out of Paris.
Congratulations, now you've managed to piss off all three houses. The commoners, the nobility, and the clergy. And there's bubbling tension and rising tension between all of them.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So, once they decided to leave Paris, the number of plots were presented to the king and the queen, but most of them she rejected because she refused to leave without the king, which was not viable because the king was indecisive. Eventually, he did commit to a plan, but it was poorly executed. It was known as the Flight to Varennes, and news of it reached a stronghold. It was a royalist stronghold in Montmédy, where some members of the royal family were to pose as servants of a Madame de Korff, a wealthy Russian baroness, which would be played by the governess of the royal children at the time, Louise Elisabeth de Croix de Tourzel. The escape was attempted in June of 1791, but less than 24 hours later, the entire royal family was arrested at Varennes and taken back to Paris. And it essentially just knocked all the support of the king out of the population. Like, their king, who they were tentatively supporting, had tried to flee instead of accepting what was happening to his country, and then was dragged back. The National Constituent Assembly actually sent a couple of representatives to escort Marie and her family back to Paris, and the people jeered and insulted them as they returned. The representative of the moderate party had to protect Marie Antoinette from the crowds during this return, and even those from the Liberal Party took pity on the royal family because of the way that they were received. The couple was not brought to trial and was exonerated of crimes in relationship to attempting to escape. Although at this point, their
days are numbered.
Yeah, the public just hated them, and
no allies anymore.
None. After the return to Varennes until the storming of Tuileries in 1792, the Queen, her family, and entourage were held under tight surveillance in Tuileries, where the royal couple was guarded night and day. Every move she made, 4 guards followed her. Her bedroom door was not allowed to be closed at night. Her health began to deteriorate because of this close watching. And eventually, in 1791, with the support of Barnave and his friends, Lafayette's guard would actually open fire on a crowd that had assembled in the Champ de Mars to sign a petition demanding the deposition of the king. It said that 12 to 50 people were killed, Lafayette's reputation never recovered, and he ended up resigning. His enmity with Marie Antoinette continued, and she took great pleasure in stopping him from becoming a mayor of Paris that same year. We have correspondence from her at this point, and while Barnave was taking great political risk because he believed that the Queen was his ally, Marie Antoinette wasn't generally considered as sincere in her cooperation with the moderate leaders of the French Revolution, which pretty much destroyed any attempt made to establish a moderate government. The view of her was that she was controlling of the king, which degraded her standing with the people, and that situation just kept getting worse until spring of 1792. She continued to hope that the European kingdoms would come to their aid and crush the revolution. She really was counting on the support of her Austrian family. Her brother Joseph II had died in 1790, but his successor had said he was willing to support her at like a limited degree, and she hoped that the threat of Australian military escalation would deter the French Revolution and the violence. Marie Antoinette said that she expected the revolution to just restore the power to the king and all would just return in tranquility and resume their ranks at court and their places in the nation. And she also wrote in the same letter that if the French monarchy fell, it would be destructive to all governments. And she wasn't entirely wrong.
For monarchies, no.
No. However, Leopold died in 1792, and his son, Francis, a conservative ruler, wanted to support the French royal couple more vigorously. So he feared the consequences of a French Revolution and what it would do to monarchies of Europe, and in particular to the Austrian influence that his mother had, his grandmother had really cemented into the Austrian royal family. So that was great. I mean, she had someone willing to support her. That's fantastic. That totally went well, right, Nick Nack?
Absolutely.
Yes, so France declared war on Austria in April of 1792 because of these actions. The Queen just became an enemy, just in general. And then people hated her more because the Austrians actually defeated the French armies several times. In part, and deservedly so, because she passed military secrets to them through her correspondence with her brother. Louis XVI would also then use his veto to veto measures to restrict his power, meaning that they got a new nickname. She was no longer called Madame Deficit. They were called Monsieur and Madame Veto. Not a great thing to be known as.
She's now committed treason, and Louis has effectively given himself a timer of 4 years.
So the moderates comprised about 260 members of the assembly, radicals around 136, and then about 350 assorted others. Initially, the majority rested with the moderates, but the Queen single-handedly radicalized the assembly through her actions. The moderate government collapsed in 1792, was replaced by a radical majority headed by the Girondins. They then passed a ton of laws about the church, the aristocracy, and National Guard units, all of which were subsequently vetoed by Louis XVI. The moderate faction had dropped to just 120 members, and the Legislative Assembly was controlled by the New Radical Party, which had over 330 members in it. The two strongest members were Jean-Marie Roland, the Minister of the Interior, and the General Charles-François Dumouriez, who was the Minister of Foreign Affairs. Dumouriez did actually sympathize with the royal couple and wanted to save them, but the Queen rebuffed his efforts. For some strange reason. So they denounced her treason, and through that of the Austrians. And even though Madame Roland sent a letter to the king that denounced her roles, Louis XVI then single-handedly disbanded the government, lost his majority in the assembly, and the tide just turned. Marie Antoinette tried to encourage the king to veto all the new laws voted by the Legislative Assembly, and then in 1791, an invasion was threatened. This led to the French declaration of war and the French Revolutionary Wars, and to the events of August of 1792. A mob in June of 1792, a mob broke into the Tuileries, made the king wear a bonnet rouge to show his loyalty to the revolution, insulted Marie Antoinette, accused her of betraying France, and threatened her life. She then asked Fersen to urge the foreign powers to invade France and issue a manifesto to destroy Paris if anything happened to the royal family. This manifesto triggered the events of the 10th of August, when an armed mob approached the palace and forced the royal family to seek refuge with the Legislative Assembly. 90 minutes later, the palace was invaded by the mob, who massacred the Swiss guards who were protecting the royal family. On the 13th of August, the royal family was taken to be imprisoned in the Tower of the Temple in the Marais under conditions harsher than those of their previous confinement. A week later, several of the attendants were taken for interrogation and then transferred to the La Fosse prison, and after rapid judgment, several of them were killed with their heads affixed on pikes, paraded through the city to the Tower of the Temple for the Queen to see. On the 21st of September, 1792, the monarchy was officially declared as fallen, and the governing body of the French Republic was the National Convention. The royal family name was downgraded. They were now called the non-royal Capets, and preparations began for a trial of their former king in a court of law. Charged with treason against the French Republic, Louis XVI was tried in December, separated from his family, found guilty, and by a majority of 6 votes in January, condemned to death by guillotine and executed less than a week later. The former queen was now called the Widow Capet, although she was in mourning, she still hoped that her son, Louis Charles, who the exiled Comte de Provence had recognized as the successor, would rule France. The royalists and the clergy, including those preparing the insurrection at Vendée, supported Marie Antoinette and the return of the monarchy. Throughout this imprisonment, she had hoped to count on the sympathy of the conservative factions and social religious groups against the revolution and on wealthy individuals who would bribe Republican officials. But all these plots failed. Marie Antoinette, her children, Elizabeth, they were insulted. The guards would blow smoke in her face as she was held captive, and she was not allowed to communicate with the outside world. However, her guards were open to bribery, and she was somewhat able to send and receive correspondence. The National Convention, after the death of Louis, was questioning what was going to happen to her. Some wanted her to die, some wanted to exchange her for French prisoners of war to the Holy Roman Emperor. Thomas Paine said that she should be exiled to America. In 1793, during the Reign of Terror, a committee of public safety, dominated by Robespierre, was formed, and Jacques Herbert and other men like him called for her trial. By the end of May, the Girondins had been removed from power, and calls were made to retrain Louis XVII and make him pliant to revolutionary ideas while he was young. They took him from his mother on the 3rd of January, handed him over to Antoine Simon, who was a cobbler and a representative of the Paris Commune, and until her removal from the temple, she would spend hours trying to catch glimpses of her son every day, who within weeks had been turned against her and accused his own mother of wrongdoings in a court of law, under the tutelage of the men who had taken him. On the 1st of August at 1 a.m, she was taken from the temple to an isolated cell in the concierge as prisoner number 280. She bumped her head against the lintel of the door as she was taken, to which her guards asked if she was hurt, and she said, "No, nothing can now hurt me." She was kept under constant surveillance with no privacy. An attempt to help her escape at the end of August was foiled due to her inability to corrupt all the guards at the time. And she received just one visit from a Catholic priest during her time imprisoned here. On the 14th of October, she was tried by the Revolutionary Tribunal. Many historians believe that this had just been, the outcome was decided in advance by the Committee of Public Safety, led by Robespierre, upon the discovery of the Carnation Plot the month prior. She and her lawyers were given less than 1 day to prepare her defense, and among her accusations were the rumors published in the Libelles, organizing orgies, sending millions of money to Austria secretly, planning the massacre of the National Guard in 1792, calling her new son the King of France, and incest, a charge levied against her by her own son, who was pressured into doing so by the man who was controlling him, the cobbler, Jacques Herbert. Not the cobbler, sorry. The man who placed him with the cobbler, Jacques Herbert. The last accusation made her irrationally emotional, and she would not even respond to it, appealing to mothers present in the courtroom and their reaction actually comforted her, because these women were not otherwise sympathetic to her, but they were sympathetic to her pleas here. Upon being pressed to address the accusations of incest, the Queen replied, "If I did not respond, it was because it would be against nature for a mother to even reply to such an accusation. On this I apply to all mothers who are present here." When the juror Joachim Villette told Robespierre this over dinner, Robespierre broke his plate and called Herbert an imbecile.
You see, I like that Robespierre guy. He's got a good head on his shoulders.
That's going to age great. Give it a year or two. On the 16th of October, she was declared guilty of the depletion of the national treasury, conspiracy against the internal and external security of the state, and high treason because of her intelligence activities, and condemned to death. Her lawyers expected life imprisonment, and in the hours that she had left, she composed a letter to her sister-in-law, Madame Elizabeth, affirming her conscience, her faith, her love, and her concern for her children. This letter never reached Elizabeth. Her will was part of the collection of papers Robespierre found under his bed and was not published until Ed Bonaventure Courtois much later. She changed when she was preparing for her execution. They treated her awfully. The guards forced her to change clothing directly in front of them. She wanted to wear a black dress of mourning, but instead she was forced to wear a white dress, the color worn by widowed queens of France. Her hair was cut short, her hands were bound behind her back, and she was put on a roped leash. Her husband had been taken to his execution in a carriage, and she was to sit in an open cart for the hour through the streets that it took through the Rue Saint-Honoré to the guillotine erected in the Place de la Révolution, the current Place de la Concorde. Despite the jeering of the crowd for over an hour, she maintained her composure, and a constitutional priest was assigned to hear her final confession. He sat next to her, but she ignored him all the way to the scaffold, as he was a priest who had pledged his allegiance to the Republic. 12:15 p.m., she was guillotined. Her last words are, "Pardonnez-moi, monsieur, je ne l'ai pas fait exprès," or "Pardon me, sir, I did not do it on purpose," after accidentally stepping on his shoe. T.H.E was employed to make a death mask of her head. Her body was thrown into an unmarked grave at the Madeleine Cemetery, and because its capacity was exhausted, it was literally closed the following year. Marie Antoinette became a symbol abroad after her execution. She was used as a scapegoat for the events of the Revolution. Thomas Jefferson would write that her inordinate gambling and dissipations with the Count d'Artois and others had been a sensible item in the exhaustion of the treasury. And essentially, she was just outright blamed for the financial situation France was in. People said that her sexual depravity was the reason why she was in that place and all that sort of stuff. She was just shat on in general. Her older sister, Maria Carolina, the one she grew up and was close to, the Queen of Naples, just was in a state of mourning, spiraled into it, and anger. She suspended all protections afforded to reformers and intellectuals in Naples, and allowed Neapolitan bishops to halt the secularization of the church, and would offer succor to the emigrators fleeing from revolutionary France, granting them pensions. Marie Antoinette and Louis XVI's bodies were exhumed in 1815 during the Bourbon Restoration, when the Comte de Provence ascended the newly re-established throne as Louis XVIII, King of France and Navarre. Christian burial took place of the remains of the King and Queen in the necropolis of French kings at the Basilica of Saint-Denis just a few days later. Marie Antoinette has been a symbol of everything that was wrong with the French monarchy for the last 200 years. That's what she became. She had no way to defend herself in death, and other people didn't defend her. When you think of the French Revolution, you think of Marie Antoinette, you think of let them eat cake. You think of a frivolous girl who spent too much, gambled too much, seduced and participated in sexual depravities, and just wasn't a good queen, wasn't a good mother, was not a good ruler, and was not a good person. I don't feel that all of that is true. I think that she did not take advantage of the education offered to her, and I think she was willfully oblivious to many things by choosing not to do so. And I think that because of that, she made a lot of decisions that she shouldn't have. But I also think that she didn't really have a lot of people in her corner, truly. Most people who were on her side were using her for the influence it could gain them. And she didn't see that, likely because she wasn't paying attention enough. And I mean, if an oblivious nature is a crime, I mean, she's guilty. But I truly don't think it was. I think this is a case of wrong place, wrong time, and then just not making the active decision to figure it out.
Well, if she were born like 100 years earlier, she would have been every other French queen. Yeah,
pretty much. I mean, her husband didn't even support a bunch of mistresses, for God's sake. You know? It's ridiculous. She's linked with fashion, the church. Her library was published after her death, and The phrase "let them eat cake" was
Fake.
never uttered. It first appeared in Jean-Jacques Rousseau's autobiographical work Les Confessions, and I mean, he probably invented it. However, in the United States, places have been named after her. Marietta, Ohio, and things like that, because of her assistance in the American Revolution. So there's a lot of movies, obviously, about her story. Like, this is an incredibly fraught political topic, and she's an incredibly interesting person historically because, I mean, look at this. She's literally one of the most famous queens of all time.
We need a musical sequel to Hamilton that's based off Marie Antoinette.
We do. We have Les Mis.
Les Mis is actually
I know.
much late. I made that reference earlier, but that's 1848.
I know.
That's
after the restoration of the Bourbons.
Yeah, that's like basically the second French Revolution.
Yeah. Question. Do I cover Izanami now or after Louis XVII?
I don't need you to go in depth on Izanami at all. I just need you to know who Izanami is, and I need you to be able to explain it if it's brought up.
Cool. Izanami no Mikoto, or the female who invites, is a creator deity and a death deity in Japanese mythology. She's also the mother goddess in Shinto traditions, and she is the sister of Izanagi, who we've talked about before. They are the last of the 7 generations of primordial deities, and she and Izanagi are the progenitors of Amaterasu, Tsukuyomi, and Susanoo.
No, I gave you two other names. First was Louis the 17th.
Yep.
Did you have anything extra you want to add to him? I know he came up quite a bit already. So
yeah, so
I have a page open for him too, if that helps you.
Louis the 17th is her younger son. So he was born Louis Charles. He was the Duke of Normandy, and because of the death of his older brother, who was the Dauphin, he became the Dauphin, a title he held until 1791, where the new constitution afforded him the title of Prince Royal rather than Dauphin. We talked about him growing up, like, briefly. There's not much more to say about him growing up. However, remember in 1793 he was put into the care of Antoine Simon, and then he levied accusations of incest against his own mother. It's said that, Louis Charles' sister, Marie Therese, would write in her memoirs about the monster that Simone was, as did several others. However, some say that Antoine Simone's wife took great care of the child. It's said that he was encouraged to eat and drink to excess, learning the language of the gutters, and foreign secretaries from Britain and Spain heard rumors from their spies that he was repeatedly raped by prostitutes to give him venereal diseases so they could supply the commune with manufactured evidence against the queen. So we don't actually know if those things happened, because there's some accounts saying that they did and some accounts saying that they abjectly didn't. However, in 1794, Simone's left the temple, and he was supposed to secure the safe transfer of their ward, who was declared to be in good health at the time. However, a large portion of the records from that time disappeared under the Bourbon Restoration, which is pretty interesting. 2 days later, Louis Charles is said by Restoration...
Did you get it?
No. Yes. 2 days later, it's said that he was put in a dark room, barricaded in like a wild animal, and that food was passed through the bars to him, who he somehow continued to survive despite the filth accumulating around him. Robespierre visited Marie-Therese in May, but no one entered the boy's room for 6 months until the prison was visited in July of 1794. The man who visited at that time says that the child was suffering from extreme neglect, but that he made no comment to his treatment. He was cleaned, reclothed, his room was cleaned, and at that point he was given the assistance of a man from Martinique named Jean-Jacques Christophe Laurent. Louis Charles was taken out for fresh air and walks in the roof of the tower. He was inspected by representatives of the civil committee, and from October onward he maintained silence. It's said that he did this because of the deposition he was forced to make against his mother. He was visited by 3 different commissioners from the Committee of Public Safety, but they refused to get him to say anything. In 1795, Etienne Lasne was appointed to be his guardian in place of Laurent, and by May of that year, the boy had become seriously ill. The doctor, Desault, who had visited him earlier, was summoned to take care of him, but a month later, he himself died suddenly with some suspicion of poison. And then new doctors, Philippe Jean Pelletan and Jean-Baptiste Domangin, were called. Louis Charles would die 7 days after the death of his doctor in 1795. An autopsy was conducted. It said that the child appeared to be 10 years of age and had died from an infection of the scrofula, or cervical tuberculosis lymphadenitis, or swelling of the lymph nodes of the neck connected to tuberculosis. From the autopsy documents, we know that Dr. Pelletan saw countless scars covering the boy's body, which is the result of the physical mistreatment he had suffered during his 2 to 3 years in the temple. He was buried in the Sainte Marguerite Cemetery, no stone erected to mark the spot, and in 1846 a skull was found there and identified to be his, although later examination 50 years later showed it to be from an unrelated teenager and likely not his at all. His heart, following tradition, was removed from his body and smuggled out during the autopsy by Pelletan, and not interred with the rest of his body. It was stored in distilled wine to preserve it, and the heart was kept dry after that. He attempted to give the heart back to Louis Charles' uncle Louis XVIII, who became king during the Bourbon Restoration, but Louis XVIII refused to accept the heart because he would not believe it was the heart of his nephew. He refused to believe that. So it was donated to the Archbishop of Paris, Hyacinthe Louis de Calais, and following the Revolution of 1830 and the plundering of his palace, his son found it amongst the ruins and placed it in a crystal urn that is still kept today. It passed to Edouard Dumont after the younger Pelletan's death and was later offered to a pretender to the throne of France and Spain, nephew of the Archduchess Maria Theresa. There were a number of claimers to the lost Dauphine position. Because there was some confusion over his actual death because of the loss of records, over 100 people in 1814, when the monarchy was restored, came from all across Europe to claim themselves the Dauphin and to regain their position. However, none of these were the Dauphin. He died. A horrible death after literal years of physical and emotional torture and trauma, and after being forced to condemn his mother in a court of law.
Speaking of dead kids, I also gave you the Earl King, or the Erlkönig, a German folk tale and poem and song.
Yeah, you did. Yeah, so written in 1782 by Goethe. So this is a ballad, and I have listened to this. I have listened to someone perform this. I have read it, and it is...
It's in Sakamoto desu ka?
It is. So it is possibly one of the most horrifying things I have ever read.
I love it so much.
It's about... So it anticipates... It describes the deaths of the bunch of children through brutal accidents, nightmarish powers of nature, disease, sexual temptation, all combining to cause the death of this boy. And it's said that it was inspired by Herder's translation of a Danish ballad about the daughter of an Allerkonge, or elf king, the night before his wedding. The elf king's daughter wants to dance. The way it goes in the story is the elf king's daughter wants to dance with her, but he refuses. Welcome, where's the hurry to leave? Step into the line, I must not dance, dance not I may, tomorrow is my wedding day, and then is cursed with sickness and death. And it is... Jesus.
So, we've seen Marie Antoinette in campaign at this point.
But I've not seen her, per se.
Yeah. Do you know do you remember the class?
Yeah, she's a caster, right?
No.
No. She's not a ruler. Is she a... She's not a rider, is she?
She's a rider.
She's a rider, okay. I was like, I keep thinking she's a caster, but I think I'm thinking of a different character.
Probably. We do have a variant or two of her, so we'll come back to caster.
Okay.
But the main one that you should be familiar with, at least in gameplay, is rider.
Yes, rider. Okay. So, flip over?
Yep. Meet a blank white loading screen.
Sorry.
Marie Antoinette rider.
Oh. Go check out her art. Look, a horse. Oh, she gets little armbands. White, the color of a queen in mourning. The teacup's really taking the cake, isn't it? That's really taking the piss. A hell of a headdress.
So, oh yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, never mind. You're probably going to cover it, but I was going to say, so is this like a lolly version of a fully grown woman, or is this her summoned young with her memories?
This is her summoned young with her memories. That's actually the first thing I was going to say.
Sorry.
She has the mindset that she did when she was new to France and happy to be its queen.
Like 14, 15, 16, 17, 18.
Yeah.
Like those 4 years where she's new to France, the Dauphine becomes the queen for the first time. People like her.
My hint at the end of the last video, Vive la France, in FGO, I don't know if it's FGO or one of its tie-in things, there's a scene where she gets a bunch of people to go, Vive la France! With
Vive
her.
la France! Vive la France!
Yeah. So... But as with most servants, she probably remembers those events. But this isn't the version of herself that lived through them. Mm-hmm. It's, at best, like a book she can read about her future life. She is deeply hurt by what ended up going down, showing humility even in the face of her eventual executioner. Mm-hmm. Yet she still loves France deeply. Also, the comments would kill me if I failed to mention that when summoned in the Orleans chapter, she tried to, I believe at the advice of Amadeus, speak more casually, which led to her using slang. One of her most memorable lines in FGO is literally, "What's up, my homies?"
I don't like that. I don't like that at all. I'm just kind of reading over this.
Yeah.
Interesting. All right. Oh, boy. A Scooby snack. All right, we've got like 4 for Mozart, so these are all for Mozart.
Yeah.
What is it, Amadeus? Why are you grinning like that? Oh, I know. I bet you thought of another cruel prank, but too bad. Now that I know, I'm going to stop you. Don't look so disappointed. Come on, let's take a walk together, and then, let's see, would you mind giving me some singing lessons? Huh? Amadeus, what's the matter? You look pale. Goodness gracious, as expected, you're looking quite pale. Your face has become pure white. Let's take a break somewhere, okay? What? My 3rd stage ascension is dangerous? Why would you say that? Alright. Sanson, does Fate call him Sanson or Sanson?
I don't think I actually have a pronunciation that Fate uses specifically, but it's...
Sanson was here just now, but he wandered off muttering something. I wonder why. Sanson... Hey, please look. Miss Skahak prepared a swimsuit for me, huh? Sanson, why aren't you looking at me? Hey, D'Aon, why don't you try on this outfit too, huh? Only if you're ordered to. Is it really that big of a deal? Come on, you should enjoy your vacation too. Look here, I chose some clothes and swimsuits that seem to suit you nicely. Oh, that's right. It might also be a good idea to walk to the merchant shop and find something together. I do like that she recognizes D'Aon as female and respects her as a person. That's nice. My, it's Mr. Salieri. How do you do? How are you feeling today? If you are feeling well, then I have a favor to ask. If you can give me singing lessons. Huh? Amadeus? He's not around. He's not here today, so don't worry. How do you do, Emperor? Oh no, don't look so sad. Even if you were born in a different nation, it is wonderful that you loved France. I hope you know that. After all, I wasn't born in France either. That's why you and I are like kindred spirits. Don't you agree? Now come on, let's say it together. Vive la France!
Who is that one about?
Napoleon Bonaparte. That's gonna be a video when we get there. How do you do, Count? Well, yes, but no, that's not completely true. I am here right now as Marie Antoinette, and so no, that's not something I should be mentioning, is it, Edmond Dantes? It's almost time for tea. Then we must let everyone else know, and that's, I assume, most of the kid group, and then others, because Charles-Henri Sanson, Mozart, Salieri, Abigail Williams, Chevalier d'Eon, Martha.
I think it's just a
Maybe it's
list
just the
of
French
servants that she's implied to have tea with consistently.
Oh, interesting. Okay. I don't feel like Europa is a stranger to me. It's not that we resemble each other, but she still reminds me of Mother. What do you think, Master? Merci mille fois. For the first time in a while, I relish in the mood for a vacation. That's to Skahak swimsuit. As I would expect of Great Britain, its maid culture is something to boast about. Its three most important requisites are for one to sweep right on point, to slice right on point, and to shoot right on point. Even so, are you not slightly overdoing this? Listen, I am about to make a purchase for souvenirs of the Round Table Knights too. How about everyone else gets something like matching aloha shirts? It seems like I can picture them wearing them while being delighted. That sounds adorable.
Wait, did she canonically buy the aloha shirts of the entire
Yes.
Round Table?
Yes. Sea demons. Hey, it was those sort of small for our enemies. Before, I competed in killing as many of them as I could and fell behind, but now they are no longer a threat to me. Octopuses are not something to cut, but something to shoot at. After that, let us both deep fry them so that they are tasty to eat. That was to Giles de Rais.
Yeah.
Delicious. Yum. Do love me some calamari.
Ability, as far as combat goes, Marie Antoinette primarily fights using her voice, which acts as a bit of a mental attack against enemies.
Which is why I thought Castor at first, but that's only because Phantom of the Opera is also
He's an assassin.
He's not.
But he's an assassin and sometimes portrayed as a berserker.
Who sings and is a caster?
Technically, Halloween Elizabeth, but
That
so does
might
Lancer
be what
Elizabeth.
I'm doing.
Trying to think. Anyone else? We have any other major singing servants?
I think that's what I'm thinking of. Yeah. All right. Keep going.
So, as far as that mental attack goes, it is particularly effective against men, being almost like a charm. And then we have her... You can look over her skills if you want before we move on to Noble Phantasm.
Yeah. I see riding, because she's a heaven-sent child of royalty conferred by God, starting from the white horse that symbolizes the French royal family. That makes sense. Alluring euphony, I assume, is the beautiful natural voice. Grace of God, because she was born to a beautiful monarch, Maria Theresa, and beautiful princess, with the charismatic leader, to charm people. Not to lead, but to charm.
Maria Theresa would be an interesting servant.
I just have a horrible flashback of like a more, and I say this with all respect, a more negative version of Mom from Mount Oe.
Mom from Mount Oe.
Our mother.
Like
a less
Minamoto no Raiko?
Yeah, a less positive version of Mommy Raiko.
See, I was thinking more of a colder character similar to Morgan.
Yeah, but keep in mind, I mean, she wrote her children weekly letters,
True.
all of them, and controlled their lives.
That said, we do have confirmation that Europa reminds Marie Antoinette of her mother.
True. Is Europa... Oh, I have not met Europa.
Europa is the namesake of Europe, so that's probably why they made that connection.
Oh, it's not like the moon Europa?
No, Europa, Zeus's...
lover.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So like the moon.
Yeah.
Named after Zeus. Okay. I have not met Europa, so that doesn't really...
Yeah. No, I know it means nothing to you, but we're both kind of wrong if that's it.
Yeah. So we have two noble phantasms. Her main is Guillotine Breaker.
Yes, this Noble Phantasm is a specialized variation of a Noble Phantasm that we will see at some point in the future called Fleur de Lis, which functions as a representation of the glory of the French royalty. For Marie Antoinette, it summons a horse called the Guillotine Breaker that simultaneously harms her enemies and provides restoration to her allies.
And the second is Crystal Palace, which is a barrier?
Yes, it's a bounded field that Marie can call on that strengthens her and her allies in combat, and also you can seal people in.
Okay, interesting. I would scroll down to check her artist, but I will see Castor if I do that.
We'll come back to that later.
Okay, I will check her artist then. Can I close this tab?
Yeah, I have Castor open separately.
Okay. You got some NPs for me.
Yep, I have a regular and an arcade.
Ooh. Very well, let's dance. Vive la France! The teacup is cute.
She is one of our oldest servants, by the way. But she had an animation update.
Oh, I was gonna say, because she doesn't look
She doesn't look like...
that old.
You don't look like William Shakespeare.
Yeah. Your proportions are not chibi-fied to the same extent. Although I generally find that even on the older servants, the more Lolita-style servants are less chibi-fied in general because they don't have to comically reduce their size to fit the sprite models. Mm-hmm. So it's more of an issue on like big men who just look like little boys with a head too big.
Blackbeard.
Yeah. That's lovely. That's very pretty.
Glad you think it's really pretty. We're going to get the more detailed arcade version now.
Yay! Man, my Discord's really popping off right now.
You're popular, apparently.
Who would have thunk? Oh shit, I'm gonna have to check that after this video. I've got a colleague I need to make sure, know if she messaged. She is cute.
Vorn really likes using her in campaign, I've noticed.
He does. But he likes all of the cute girl characters.
True.
Especially like some of the queens. So I don't blame him. She's cute. She's not personally a servant that I would get much use out of. That's why I gave her to him, but you know. Once again, just very nice looking, you know? Oh, that's Enkidu.
Poor Enkidu.
I don't know, man. Alright, give me a second. So you got another Marie Antoinette to show me now?
Yep, we have a summer variant. The one we were looking at earlier. Now we're going to jump to Castor Marie Antoinette.
Oh, that's not very different. I'm not mad about it, but at least this first design is pretty similar. Oh, crab. That's cute. I don't even hate that. Yeah. That's adorable. I like the little crab on her head in the first one. Cute. Okay. All right.
So lore-wise, as one of our earliest swimsuit servants, I really don't have a lot of lore for her, like most of them. Skahawk fucked with her spirit origin a bit. She's a caster now. No real change in characterization or arc.
Mm-hmm. Love that for her. Let's see. Territory creation, item construction. She's a caster. Beach flower. Many looks of public attention one can gather. Okay, so she's a celebrity. Sparkle of sunflowers for displaying a smile at the beach.
I mean, primarily the way she's fighting here, she's just hitting the enemy with the beach ball.
I love that for her. Beautiful princess is still here, but of the sea.
It's not even always the case that she's fighting them. Sometimes it's just because she doesn't realize that they're actually in combat and she just spikes the ball at people.
Mm-hmm. So her noble phantasm is Crystal Dress.
Yeah, so this is just Marie Antoinette manifesting the Crystal Palace as a dress that, when worn, deals damage to her enemies and provides support to her allies.
Okay, let's see. So her concept is an idol queen, an idol who flew down to 18th century France, or a glass angel. Okay, and the person who designed her also designed David in Fate Apocrypha, and in Fate Grand Order designed Gilgamesh, Castor, and Mandricardo.
Hey.
Oh, and in Fate Grand Order Arcade, it was Nebuchadnezzar 2.5.
That's just... Yeah, we did Gilgamesh. That's just
Yeah,
Gilgamesh
we covered Nebuchadnezzar.
So yeah, I have some NPs here whenever you're ready. And I see you looking at the development trivia, though.
Yeah, because I would, use a blue one piece because of the feeling, but Takeuchi said that he could do the white dress. Or him or her, I don't know the gender of Ginka. But interesting. Okay.
You don't always know.
Yeah.
When there's pen names involved.
Yeah.
Did you know that for a while people thought Nasu could potentially be a woman because there wasn't any pictures of him for a long time?
I wouldn't be surprised. I know Arko Wada's the one who's a girl, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Or at least as far as we know.
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, just hit him with the beach ball.
A lot of them now we do know, but...
Hit him with the volleyball. Do it. Spike that volleyball at them. Sorry, that's a hilarious way to fight. Just like...
Volleyball.
Yeah. So, this is with an update. Okay. Like animation update.
This one might be an older one, though.
Well, it says it was posted a year ago.
I don't think it was updated, though. This is still...
Oh.
It's not, like, launch, but this is, like, year 1.5.
Because I was going to say, it looks a little more... archaic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not as bad as, like, Marie Antoinette would have been back at launch.
Yeah. But... Ooh. Oh, that's super pretty. I like that a lot. Although I think in her skirt there's an allusion to the diamond necklace, which is rather tasteless if you ask me. But I'd have to get a closer look at it, which I'm sure will be available when we get to doing art stuff. Okay.
So, next we're going to hop right over to her son, Louis VII, who is a servant.
17th?
17th, sorry. Do you have any guesses as to the class?
I want to say ruler, but I don't think that's correct. Saint? I don't know.
I mean, that's just the ruler class, so...
Oh, is it the same thing?
Rulers are saints.
Okay,
so, yeah.
Sorry. For some reason, I thought they were two separate classes. I want to say ruler, but I don't think it's ruler. Maybe caster?
So you had it on the complete opposite end of the spectrum with ruler. He is an avenger.
Oh, actually, I'm not surprised, and I will say I do continually forget that avenger is a class that can be...
So he's not an FGO servant.
Oh, so that's straight up just his portrait done in...
Yeah.
Yeah, like that. I mean, look.
Yeah.
It's the... Okay, all right.
For now, though, that is the only official design we have of him.
Okay.
But we do have a lot going from him story-wise.
Mm-hmm.
So Louis XVII, son of Marie Antoinette, has very little in his life. He was considered king by a loyalist to the French crown after his father was killed, but would never actually really use that to stake claim to power because he would die pretty young. Mm-hmm. We don't know a lot about him, but we do know that he's apparently outwardly friendly and charming, but in reality, he is summoned as an Avenger servant, and on the inside, he's a psychopathic monster acting out to punish the world for what they did to him.
I mean, I would be too. I see he's got a noble phantasm.
Yeah, so prior to the events of Fate Requiem, so we're going to be getting into some Requiem spoilers, guys, he and his master would go on a murder spree before being put down by the series' main protagonist, who had befriended them in therapy, not knowing their true nature fully.
Oh, dear.
So, a lot of trauma being unpacked here.
Yeah. So he's got a noble phantasm?
Yeah, so we don't actually know like how he functions combat-wise, but his noble phantasm is...
La Grosse Tour?
Yes. This is the tower where he was trapped in during his childhood due to the French Revolution.
Yeah.
It's his prison, and he can summon it or turn another structure into it. This is where he was hiding the bodies of those he was killing on that murder spree, and he is all able to trap living people in there, putting them into a state of total isolation.
I love that. That's great. Stunning.
So, we aren't done with lore on Marie Antoinette.
No, because you've got someone called Aris Utsumi.
I was actually going to save this next part, the character we're covering next, until the Voyager video, because she's Voyager's master. Mm-hmm. But her backstory is kind of interconnected with our next Marie Antoinette variant. So, unfortunately, it's about time I have to talk about Fate Requiem's main character. Mm-hmm. Complete spoiler alert for the events of Fate Requiem, including major revelations in Volume 2, which at this time has not been fully translated by fans. Mm-hmm. So, if you want, you can move over to the next page.
Can I close this?
Yeah, you can close that.
Okay. So
this is Aris. So she lives in probably one of the most unique Fate timelines. It's referred to as after the Holy Grail War, as in this timeline, a series of Holy Grail Wars led to an actual world war.
Oh, Jesus.
By the end of the last war, the entire world had been flooded, with humanity having to pick up the pieces on on the remaining land masses. Mm-hmm. They had help, though, in that somehow nearly every human suddenly gained a Holy Grail and 3 command spells. And with that, every human also had a partner servant. Mm-hmm. The first generation that was alive during the war was limited to the 3 spells, which did the usual things and were expanded to also allow them to make a wish on their Holy Grail, with some limitations in scope.
Yeah.
But the second generation had an infinite amount of command spells, and therefore infinite wishes, which effectively meant eternal life.
Have we heard about this before in a video?
No. You were there when I was doing a Fate Requiem review.
That's it. Okay, so I have already heard this before. Okay.
Yeah.
I was so confused. I was like, this sounds familiar. Do I perhaps
So the next parts won't sound as familiar because these parts were revealed in the new volume that I have not reviewed on the channel and has not been fully translated. Aris here is actually a half-servant born from her human father having a child with his summoned servant Izanami.
Oh, interesting.
This the lore term here is going to be quasi-servant, and so far Aris is the only known one. Due to being part servant, she would be born with no command spells, no grail, and no servant of her own.
Oh, that's unfortunate.
Yeah. It's kind of that no quirk in My Hero Academia thing. She's a cripple.
Yeah.
Instead, she simply fights using magecraft and a special ability of hers called the Dread Spirits. The Dread Spirits are evil spirits that inhabit and taunt Aris while also being usable as a tool by her, as a single touch of one is extremely poisonous to servants.
Okay.
They also have sentience, leading her to call them the Erlkönig, named after the German fairy king.
The German fairy king.
Yep.
Yeah. And the horrible story about that child's death.
Yep. So she uses that ability to hunt servants that act out against, like, ones that are incompatible with society. So, like, Louis XVII was one of her more traumatic targets.
Yeah. Because he goes on a murder spree, understandably.
And, yeah, that's her job. They actually end up calling her the Grim Reaper because of that. When she's not traveling to hunt servants, she lives in Akihabara. Mm-hmm. She's extremely efficient at what she does and holds a special level of respect and admiration for servants, seeing them as fully fledged people in their new world.
Yeah.
Partially informed by her former friendship and guilt at having to kill Louis. As a result, she has a deep distaste for a sport that amounts to servant gladiatorial games called the Holy Grail Tournament, which have become the world's most popular sport. While most servants find it enjoyable, she believes it to be barbaric and exploitative.
I can see why.
But another huge part of that might be her resentment at being the only human not having a servant.
Yeah.
She would later go on to summon Voyager, the last servant to ever be summoned in that world, but that's a story for another day.
Okay. So you've also got another form of her?
Yes, she was added to FGO in a collaboration event. So I actually have a bit more on her, actually.
Okay.
And this is where things start to get really important for us.
All right.
So she is summoned as a Lancer servant. Fast forward, and Aris is summoned in FGO. Here it's revealed that the Erlkönig are basically...
She looks like Himiko, but in blue.
I think that's kind of the point, actually.
Oh, okay.
All
right.
I forget the name, but the same kind of thing going on as Himiko. Here it's revealed that the Erlkönig are actually demonic and are constantly looking for a sacrifice, even willing to consume Aris if they don't get what they want. We also learn that deep down, Aris wished she could actually be a servant. And at some unspecified point in her story, she and Voyager stumble upon a holy grail, which grants that wish, but that wish also gives power to something else that we'll get into a little bit later.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Oh, I've got relationships. All right. Voyager, I'm no longer his master. And that's why what I'm about to say is probably not appropriate or even sensible, Master. But I just can't help but to give some advice. Please use him with care. Wow, Voyager looks so grown up. I didn't know he could look like that. That's honestly unsettling. Maybe the biggest predicament in my Chaldean life. Huh? He changed for my sake. He made it so I wouldn't have to be the older sister because I couldn't handle the job? Oh, that brat. Well, I gotta be responsible to prove him wrong. Okay. So that's the Knight of the Lake. So he's Galahad's. I'm half convinced, half skeptical. Forget his normal self. I guess when someone's put in the worst situation and their unbelievable talent gets honed to the extreme, you have a recipe for a monster like that. The Round Table is terrifying. To think that the one who fused with MASH is the genuine Holy Knight Galahad. It is a form of spirit possession different from heroic spirit possession that I know of. Although it'd be nice if that's seen as a desirable connection from MASH's standpoint.
So one of her friends has Galahad Altar as a servant, if you remember Galahad Altar from our massive Round Table video.
Yeah. I'm getting a lot of hearsay from the Round Table associates on my choice of swimsuit. The weird thing is that each of them had a very different impression of it. What kind of person Sekhie was, the mystery deepens.
I actually don't know what's going on with that one.
Maybe he said something?
Kay isn't currently in FGO, so her swimsuit might have a reference to Sir Kay.
Well, Kay has a page.
I believe Sir Kay is in FGO right now. The closest we have to FGO Sekhie. Is Sekhie the one that became Ad in Grey's?
I don't remember, but Kay is Arthur's older foster brother.
Yeah, it is Ad.
Oh, okay.
Ad, so that's the only... We've seen Sekhie. He's in Case Files, too.
Oh, fuck me.
You good?
I got my shave redone earlier today, and I think a piece of it went into my eye. Like the cut hair.
So it's just bothering you?
Yeah. That's why I've been, like, wiping my eyes. Okay. I gotta stop. Alright. Sir Francis Drake. She single-handedly sailed through the 7 seas and explored the planet, a hero who holds a special place in my heart. But it's not like I know her personally, and I'd be happy to know if she's someone special to you too, but honestly, I didn't know she was female. I'm still a little bit rattled by that fact. That island witch, she isn't any different from the Circe I know. Then that's her original personality, as expected from Greek mythology. So sinful... No, so profound. Huh? I'm not saying it right. Freikugel is the correct term for magic bullet, and Freischütz means shooter? Ugh, you're right. Thank you for your advice, Mr. Mustache. Queen Marie. She's so dazzling, I can't look straight into her eyes. I don't know what it is. Is it her noble pride? Her love towards all? Her devotion? No. Is it her pride that enables her to be true to herself no matter what? She's so dazzling, I can't look straight into her eyes. In my own world, in the past, I had killed that person's son, so because of that, I completely feel indebted to her no matter what. Though perhaps there's more to it than that. I looked at that person who is pure in all respects with suspicion without meaning to. I envy you, Koyo. You look terrifying, but you're still very trustworthy. Why? Well, because my instincts tell me. Huh. Actually, I don't know why. Maybe because you look like someone I know? It's fine, Koyo-san, isn't it? Although you're very terrifying, you're also someone who can be diligently relied upon. It's so disappointing that she has no memory of me in Voyager, but even so, I want to be dependable to Koyo-san. A Koyo that still doesn't know Karen? Koyo's case is a matter of the Throne of Heroes twisting time, and I also have some gaps in my memories. Something might cause us to remember. It's scary, but at the same time it's irritating that it's taking this long to happen. Karen. She's exactly like my teacher. No, this one still has some childlike innocence left in her, but the way she marches to the beat of her own drum is a bit mean and acts like she's been hurt after going through so much. She's like a fish that gets livelier in muddy water, but she envelops you so warmly. Yep, she's definitely like her. I never expected an encounter like this might be in store for me. Being a servant sure is hard. I subconsciously happen to call her teacher, although the other person sort of doesn't mind much. My teacher is one of the people who had taken the trouble to guide me from my little self, who was just like a doll, to someone who is now living as a human being. But you know, she herself was an AI, not a human. Karen-san, who is close to the original, was more intense than what I had imagined about her. I keep always calling Mrs. Karen Sensei on reflex. She didn't rebuke me specifically for it, but she did tell me off with the faintest smile. Your lexicon is lacking in variety. The porca idiom cannot be your only poison dart. You're less of a death god and more of a god of poor vocabulary. Ah, ain't she the coolest? Right. I feel an unknowable surge of power coming from that Mesoamerican jaguar heroic spirit servant. Why does everyone call her Jaguamura? See, I tried asking that samurai if his name was Tsuda, and he was completely evasive with his answer. He said, "Mayhaps, yet I am Sekhie Kojiro, but one servant of obscure grounds and career. Nothing else is needed in our noble master's presence." I had a question for him. I see. Chaldea's Napoleon is an archer, a different servant from the Bonaparte I know. He was a rider and much thinner. It's confusing, but that's one of the most interesting things about servants. That priest, the mad monk Rasputin, came to treat me to a wonderful meal. Ah, the deep flavor feels nostalgic for some reason. The spice spread through my whole body. I could feel my chest sweating. Sorry, can I lie down for a bit? Did he poison her?
No, we'll get into it when we eventually do Rasputin. But Rasputin, there is something in his character where he really likes making extremely spicy mapo tofu.
Airy Pie? Who taught you this nickname? Don't you think it would get confusing with all the Elizabeths here? Well, if you really want to call me that, I won't stop you.
Her reaction to Rasputin's food is my reaction to the death soup.
My God. You liked that death soup.
It was great soup. It wasn't the taste. The taste was amazing. It was going down. It was like once it was already down, that was a problem.
I make my chili spicier than that soup.
So Aris is a Lancer servant, gains access to the to Same no Sakahoko, a spear that was also, if you recall...
Ame no Sakahoko?
Sorry, that must have been my spell check.
Yeah.
So yeah, Ame no Sakahoko, which you also recall was used by Ryoma and Oreo, though this is the more normal version, not from the Guda Guda world.
Yes.
She makes use of it in combat alongside her usual magecraft and the Dread Spirits, and that's how she typically plays in FGO. She ends up being extra effective at killing servants, especially anti-heroes.
Mm-hmm. Magic resistance, nullifying magecraft spells, okay, riding, independent action, divinity because of the association with Izanami, sacred dread spiritualist, free shooter, imitation because of demon hunter Samiel of the Bohemian Legend, and Grim Reaper because she hunts down servants. And then her noble phantasm is Ame no Sakahoko.
So Aris uses the spear from Japan's creation to churn time and space itself, ripping apart her targets at an existential level with the possibility of just instantly killing them.
I love that. All right. MP for me.
Yep.
See, it's when you throw in shit like this at me and I'm just like, what the fuck, Fate?
Look, I got to keep you on your toes. No, I didn't expect to be doing this one today either.
Yeah. So. It's a cool spear. It's a really freaking cool spear. If I didn't know it was a spear, I'd almost call it a fancy naginata. But it is a spear, and I know that. Okay. She's welfare, too, because she only had 2 forms. Oh, interesting.
A lot of the Type Moon original characters end up being welfare servants.
Yeah. Oh, well, she's new servant. Or at least newer, because she's got some fancy-ass NP.
Relatively newer. She's around 4 years old now.
Well, they put a lot into her NP.
So, we do have a summer variant of her as well.
Okay.
She got... her summer variant is an Avenger servant. You wouldn't tell by the design.
No, not even a little.
I thought maybe later form? No.
Oh, adorable. Look at that. Man. Design-wise, this is, to be honest, probably one of the best female summer servants I've seen in terms of, outfit, at least to my sort of sensibilities and tastes. I think this outfit is, really cute. What a nice way to, do a cover-up at a beach, that sort of thing, or at a pool.
This is one of our newer servants. Yeah. She's literally coming out this year in FGO for NA.
This is adorable. You know I love me a good little sailor outfit. And then this is also just really cool looking.
I grabbed her on a free ticket this year, actually.
Okay. Oh, does she not have a... Oh, she doesn't have a... She has a baseball, but not a chibi because she's coming out this year?
In NA, yeah. She might not... Yeah, she doesn't have a chibi.
Okay. Yeah, she just looks good. I like it.
So this version of her is not particularly extra angry at all, and the Avenger class is likely just the result of her Dread Spirits, as far as I can tell. And it'll be... about now that I mentioned that, just because I have no better time to mention this, that Aris might have had more FGO exposure than she does in her original novels, as currently the novels appear to be on hiatus after only 2 volumes. The fandom has jokingly said that she's been effectively adopted as an FGO character.
Rather than as a novel character?
Yeah. This is all to my absolute chagrin, as I actually kind of really liked the volume that I read and reviewed for the channel.
Oh, that's unfortunate, but the volume 2's out now.
Yeah, I'm still waiting on its translation, though, and the translator got kind of deterred by the fact that it's been
coming out.
4 years now since the last volume.
I can understand that.
Aris came out in FGO and got a summer variant and multiple FGO appearances before another volume has come out. The collab event was to promote volume 2.
Oh. Well, I see all the normal class skills I would expect from an Avenger.
Yeah.
And then Sacred Dread Spiritualist is the same as before. Grim Reaper also, but her Noble Phantasm has changed. Ame no Kagami no Fune.
So her combat style now is to literally just basically infect the inner tube and other beach items she has with the Dread Spirits and smack the enemies upside the head with them.
I love that.
The Ame no Kage Minofune. I think I got that one right.
Kagami no Fune.
Yeah, so this is the boat of Kami Sukunabikano. Sorry, I don't have my Japanese god translations.
Kamisku Nabikano?
Yeah. That is capable of traveling between worlds. Aris rented it from the god and uses its abilities.
It's a rental.
It is on rental. It is on lease.
Don't fuck it up. It's a rental.
Yeah. And uses its abilities to assist her in combat, especially when on the water.
That's pretty cool. All right. Sorry, I was just looking at her character designer. Same person as Voyager, Kijo Koyo, and Izumo no Okuni.
Izumo no Okuni is an interesting one. It's kind of out of left field. Izumo no Okuni is a Gouda servant, while the other ones are all Fate Requiem.
Yeah. Interesting. So I assume you've got...
Yep.
Yay!
No FGO&A trailer, unfortunately, so...
Okay, this shit says it's available in 4K. My monitor is 4K. I want to see that 4K. I want to get my money's worth, knick-knack.
You paid for the good money for this monitor.
I paid good money.
You're watching your videos in 4K.
Yeah, if they are available in 4K, I'm watching that shit in 4K. Ooh, look, a windsurfer.
That's the boat.
Oh.
It's a rental.
It's a rental. That makes so much sense now. She just said Auf Wiedersehen.
Yep.
It should be out of
Remember, she named her dread spirits the Dura Elkoneg.
That's true. That's
she
true.
She is
German inspired.
Yeah.
Yeah. I do like that she's got like when she gets like the scythe and like the little leg things, they're like black with the blue glow. That's pretty cool. We love us a good dark palette for dark powers.
I just used her to punch Tezcatli Polka in the face a few weeks ago.
Did you enjoy punching Tezcatli Polka in the face with her?
Yes.
Okay, I'm gonna yanked my footstool away. I'm gonna skip forward to her NP a little bit. If it'll load. Better than it was the other day. Oh. Yeah. Windsurf. Windsurf. Yeah. Oh, man. She just fucking came down on that dude. That's pretty freaking cool. I see we only have one thing left.
Yes. So, we have the next Marie Antoinette. You had a guess at the class?
Avenger.
Yes.
That seems to be the theme.
So, this is Marie Antoinette.
Host.
The fan base calls her Marie Antoinette Alter.
Yeah.
But the in-game, her referred names are the Black Marie and the Dark Marie, depending on your translation.
Look at all the little fleur-de-lis on her. So fleur-de-lis is actually just the word that refers to that little like three-pronged symbol that's popular in a lot of royalty and in France. It's called a fleur-de-lis.
So, if you want to scroll down, she actually has a Red Riding Hood design as well.
Oh my god, it's so cute with little roses inside. And there's a little jack-o'-lantern with heart eyes in her basket.
So she is the
reason... Is this a Halloween?
No. She is the reason I had to do Aris early. During our introduction to FGO, Aris's dread spirits managed to use the Grail's power to enhance themselves as well. Mm-hmm. They used Aris's connection to Louis XVII to create a twisted version of Marie Antoinette that is created from a combination of Aris's guilt over killing Louis, as well as being the haughty version of Marie Antoinette that she was viewed as by the general public. This is your time to let them eat cake, Marie Antoinette.
Well, everything she eats goes right to, Did you read that down here? She's been eating good.
So, earlier in the story, she just appears to be Marie Antoinette Rider dressed as Little Red Riding Hood. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, for all that buildup, she has neither a servant nor even a boss sprite, just a class, a portrait, and a backstory.
Aww.
That said, the Red Riding Hood design, I found this out today as I was prepping for the video, was added as a costume for Marie Antoinette Rider in arcade before they stopped additional content. And that's what the video I have up there is.
Oh, you've got me an arcade. costume. If it loads. All right, let me just... I think it's just been a while since...
Oh, I almost forgot what she can actually do as the Dark Marie. So since she's created by the Dread Spirit, she also possesses their abilities, and likely as a result of Arisa's connection to Izanami, she can summon Japanese monsters and is capable of spreading the Earl-Kind curses across the entirety of Shinjuku.
Lovely. All right. Oh, this is a crisp trailer. Well, because it's an advertisement. Yeah. Aww, she's so cute. Look at her, it's adorable. Little dress, little hair and braid. Oh yeah, beat him up. I don't know who you're fighting. Oh, it's Bathory. Beat her up, beat her up. Oh, it's just a version of the...
It's still Marie Antoinette
yeah.
right at the end of the day.
Yeah.
But I thought you'd appreciate seeing the costume in a little bit of motion.
I think it's cute.
So yeah, that's our Marie Antoinette video.
All right.
It went much longer than I thought it was going to be.
You have to expect with modern like our first 1 hour plus video was on a modern historical figure. It was on Helena Blavatsky. Anything on a modern, well-known figure is going to go significantly longer if you want me to actually be comprehensive and provide my own take on things.
Speaking of, I was playing Persona and they give like little, because it's part with school, they give you like little questions from the teachers that you have to answer, and they're always like historical, trivia, science, math. One of them was on theology in Helena Blavatsky, and it's like
Theosophy.
Theosophy. I don't know. I don't usually get any of those right. I usually have to look them up or check to see what everyone else voted. I got that one right.
Oh, good.
Fate taught me something.
I taught you something. I love that she's like the coach with the orange slices for the team in her little baseball figure. That's so cute. Okay. Oh.
There's the sprite sheet.
Oh yeah. I'm opening these because they're Black Marian. Oh yeah, there's her little costume. Okay. All right. Some stuff down here. Oh yeah, some stuff down here. So cute. There's her full version of this art.
She's a pretty popular character in the FGO community just because she was so early and she was a lot of people's first servant.
Is this in the Netherlands? Placing my bet now. And I have a reason for that. And can you tell what the reason is based on the photo?
No.
Tulip economy. Tulip economy. All right, we've got some other stuff. So her and someone else. I don't know who. Doesn't matter. It's nice art. Oh, look at that. Oh, close up of that art. This is very pretty. Okay. Now we're... Oh, because there's the arcade art and then also the photo samples. Okay. All right. We also have a command code that we can see. All right. All right. Royal White Steed. Well, that is beautiful. Valentine's chocolate. Oh, is this what you call a message card? Is it like a letter, I wonder? All right, then. Let's see. Good afternoon. Please enjoy my utmost feelings for you. It's far too much white chocolate for me, but it's beautiful.
I like white chocolate.
I don't. White chocolate is a lie. The diamond affair. My necklace. There's some history behind this necklace. Sure, I got into some trouble with this necklace, but still, I like this necklace because it is so sparkly and pretty. Yeah, well, it also generally doomed you, so. All right, formal dress. It's nice to see a formal dress that's actually formal dress. I've commented this before, but a few of them have just been not my favorite. All right. The Princess's Pilgrimage. We saw this just a little while ago for Bradamante, right?
Yeah,
No.
I think you're Astolfo.
Astolfo, yeah, that's it.
You're just missing one servant in there now.
Yep. It's very cute, though. Heroic Spirit Festival wear. It's Halloween theme. I told you, it's a Halloween theme,
The design
right?
might have debuted in Halloween. Actually, you're right. You might be right.
Well,
on
it's
that.
4th anniversary, but yeah, it's Halloween Town. Apparently, if you really look, you can see an Adam, a Medjed, a Sparrow, a Fu, a Mekaeli-chan, a Pumpkin Gazer. They're in the balloons. Okay. Travel journal.
There's a voice to that.
Oh, no, it's in... Sorry, I'm actually gonna look this up because I'm really curious about that. It's a theme park recreating the Netherlands, displaying life-size copies of old Dutch buildings. I'm gonna count that as a winning.
At least got the theme correct.
I knew exactly what it was. Tulip economies. Have you heard of the tulip economies?
No.
Oh, I am so excited to explain to you the tulip economies. I learned my lesson.
Vive la France!
I will not explain to you the tulip economies right now because they are not relevant, but it's something that I think you would be fascinated by. And one of the few economic things that I have been fascinated by. All right. City where dreams are born. That's an interesting array of characters. Obviously, this isn't a place to be indecisive. Fill your heart with anticipation and curiosity and head out into the city that's full of fantasy and wonder. Okay. Opera in arcade. Oh, we've seen this.
Yep.
Yep. Because I already read this, yeah. All right. Still in the middle of a trip. Oh, up top. Front and center, right? That's gotta be. With the white hair and the pigtails?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, it's gotta be. Okay, Caster. Grail League. She's a cheerleader with her little crab on her head. Adorable. Okay, I wanted to catch this here specifically. Oh, that is awful resolution. Why is it so bad? I just want to see like a good... Oh, there is just not a good resolution of this. Okay. It's just pixelated to hell and back for some reason. Okay. Alright. Ooh, summer event.
Oh, yeah. That doesn't need explanation.
No. Okay. Alright. This version got a dual, FGO dual. Alright. We got 3. One of them I already know. Reminiscence of the summer. Summer memories. That's right. There were so many wonderful memories, it's hard to choose just one. But today I'll tell you about the Petit Trianon, I guess. It was a palace a little ways from Versailles that I rebuilt from the ground up myself. I made its grounds look like you were in the middle of Mother Nature, an English-style guardian, you see. I'm not sure what you'd call it in your time. There was so much greenery and beaches, and rocky mountains and even caves. A little shrine. Oh, and there was also this cute sphinx. I loved it. Yes, I loved relaxing there in the summer, talking with my little sister and my friends. I think sometimes I'd take off my court clothes and put on the dresses that were popular that season, or maybe a hat to keep out the sun. Oh dear. It's just like the vacation I'm having right now, isn't it? Alright, Mont Blanc au chocolat. White mountain of chocolate. Don't you eat this during summer? This thing called shaved ice. I tried to make it look like the beautiful summit of Mont Blanc using white chocolate. What do you think? Please have some. What is it with white chocolate, you people? Give it up.
Yum.
I hate white chocolate. I see her. She's right there. Alright, Utsumi. Grail League. Aw, so cute. Alright. Do we have... we got 1. Cute. There's a command code, but it's just featuring the little patch on her shoulder. Alright. Mission start. A world that makes no sense, a situation that makes no sense. The Reaper enters the board game world intent on taking back what she lost, and now 5 points of wonder emerge.
I forgot to mention the world that the Grail took her to was just entirely based off board games. We played a giant game of tedious Monopoly, a game of Werewolf, and a bunch of other games that were really not that fun to actually play, and a lot of people hate that event. And it was written by someone other than her original author, so I'm actually pretty resentful at that event because it butchered her character.
I hate Monopoly. Caudron Simone. Caudron C. 630 Simone, registered name F-A-N-R-Y. This aircraft that carried the author Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, or rather an intricate wooden model of that aircraft. Utsumi Iris kept this as a memento of her father. It was this aircraft that Saint-Exupéry crashed in the Libyan desert during an air race from Paris to Saigon. It is said that his experience during this crash was what inspired him to write the novella The Little Prince. Saint-Exupéry was a plane enthusiast, so much so he purchased yet another airplane even after his crash, going so far as to incur considerable debt. Throughout his life, he had many crashes and accidents. One such accident at the age of 23 caused him to break off an engagement. At the age of 35, when he crash-landed in a desert, he managed to survive 4 days on only 1 day's worth of water until he was rescued by the nomadic tribe called the Bedouin. Finally, at the age of 44, he was assigned to a military scouting mission using an unarmed aircraft. He was shot down and finally met his demise. While he was a well-known author, he was an aviator at heart, a man who continued to look up at the sky. Well, at least that's how the legend goes. A model of a crashed airplane might be lame, but I'm actually attached to it. Interesting. Normal Friends chocolate. So on that note, here's your Valentine's Day chocolate. I went back to square one and did my research this time. As you can see, it's a completely ordinary chocolate. This box is the actual gift, and the other is for you to taste test. They both have the same chocolate inside. You're wondering why you should try it? Well, I was worried you might not like it, and I try not to be too adventurous when it comes to home cooking. I tested it myself too, and it was good. Plain, but fragrant. If you don't like it, just give it back. I'll own my mistake and dispose of it. It might be good with a cup of coffee, too. Coffee. All right.
Coffee.
Utsumi Iris, Avenger. We do have a Grail League. I love her. It's adorable. There are so many expression sheets on some of the newer servants. She's not even the one we've seen with the most.
No, the one with the most right now is Castorian. I don't think it's all of them are logged into the wiki either for Castorian.
There are a lot for every single one of her. Yeah. Okay. No extra art yet.
Here's the foot art.
Well, we don't talk about that. Ares Land official plushies. Sew Up Ares Land series official plushies. Available in standing, sitting, and Nezoberi types. Ares Land's crewmates full of epic spirit. Take them with you on your adventure. Bon voyage. When did they make this merch? Wait, no one told me anything about this. No, I'm not saying I don't approve of it. Wait, can you leave these samples here? I'll take responsibility and dispose of them myself. Yeah. Planetary donuts. Donuts. Look, the little Magatama. That looks like a volcano. I know they're all planet-based, but still. Oh, boy.
What?
Yeah. And guess what? If I don't do this, you're going to kill me. All right. Prizes for an archaeology quiz held unexpectedly. A reward for masters who have achieved excellent results. Elise made it by hand using a candy-making book and a necktie. He insists that they have chocolate-covered donuts, so it's a classic Valentine's Day candy. You'll understand when you see it. I think you'll understand. The motif is stars and planets, and of course there's the floating ring. Oh, it's a masterpiece, and the jelly inside has spilled out a bit. It's kind of a thing. The Voyager probe discovered during a flyby that there is volcanic activity on the satellite, so I thought I'd try to express that magma. Yeah.
I am shocked that in all of the Erase CEs that we did today, that none of them spoiled Voyager's design for you.
There was some stuff in her background page that I had to avoid because it was captioned FGO art with her and Voyager. So when I scrolled through the art, I just scrolled past it. Yeah. But yeah, no, they did a pretty good job not spoiling the other. Because I know you've been waiting on Voyager.
Yeah. Originally, I was waiting because I wanted to get more Voyager stuff, but also we put Voyager in the schedule for later, like 2 years ago.
Yeah, how is that going?
Horribly.
That's hilarious to me. Oh, I don't actually remember who's next, do you?
Let me think for a minute.
I'll find it. Oh.
And suddenly it clicked.
Was that deliberate?
I meant not to do so. I'm about to get kicked.
I just thought you were being an asshole and kicking me. I'm gonna be honest.
So, Sekhie, if it's alright with you, I'm going to systematically and in a pattern punch holes in your wall until I figure out where the dev is hiding.
I can help you. I've got one of those wall scanners to look for studs.
Oh, thank God.
So we can find people hidden in the walls. 'Cause I swear to fucking Christ, if this happens one more time, I'm gonna fucking lose it. See, here we are trying to prep for me to be away for like 3.5 months, thinking we'll get ahead on our recording. That way you guys will have uninterrupted content for all the months that I'm gone.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So we're recording things ahead. We're doing these really long, detailed videos. This update is brought to you at approximately 3 hours into Marie Antoinette's video.
I almost chucked my phone out the window when I saw the stuff. Here's the kicker here. And Sekhie, the comments at this point is months old news. There were stuff that would have been perfect in updates that got added the literal week we stopped being able to add stuff to updates.
Yeah, was it drop from something?
They did animation updates for the Johns, and they added a new Hassan.
Yes, I remember hearing about the new Hassan.
So,
which, I mean, I love me a new Hassan, but...
Someone is out to fucking get us.
Here's the thing. I'm not saving these video files anywhere public. I promise you, they're only saved to the hard drive on my computer.
Okay, but our schedule is on a Google Drive. Someone's hacked us.
I better start privatizing shit. Swear to God.
So, yeah.
At least this isn't as bad as the Demons of Mount Oe video.
What, where we had 2 addendums that were both at least... Well, I think both of them were 2 servants or more long.
Uh-huh. Knock on wood.
So, yeah, we have a new version of Marie Antoinette. You know how I said that the Marie altar was not added to the game yet and was probably never going to be added? She got added to the game.
So Marie altar is now a servant?
Yes. This is not her typical page. You can go ahead and move over to the typical page if you want.
Oh.
That's her first form.
Oh, I'm going to flip over here to see her forms. Okay, a little disco ball-y, a little disco ball action. Oh, I'm loving the fleur-de-lis. Yep, that's Black Marie. That's definitely Black Marie. I kind of... Were they trying to go for like a cyberpunk-esque look for the first art?
So the first art was actually going...
Street punk?
It was going for more street punk because the setting... I don't have a lot of notes on this because this is so brand new. I haven't had the chance to look at all the lore. But the setting was actually a modern day setting where most of the servants weren't actually servants. They were real people just using the appearance of servants because that's what was available to them.
Okay, because I'm liking this first form, and I'm really liking Form 2. Form 3 is a little out there for me, but I can appreciate just the sheer, scale of it. Although I will say she is repping the bisexual flag proudly. Loving that. All right, what do you got to tell me about Marie Antoinette altar?
Not much. The only thing I can gather is that first form is a disguise, obviously. Mm-hmm. Disguising again as normal Marie. Or Marie disguised as a not Marie, but is Marie Antoinette, but alter. And the other thing I have here is, from what I can tell about her, Aris managed to be very accurate in her replication of Marie Alter in the Requiem event. She's got, apparently, from what I've heard, she's also very vengeful towards the people of France and what they did to her.
Okay, interesting. So I assume we have an NP.
Yes.
Because she did just get added. I'm just going to precautionarily lower that. Yeah, that's fine.
We do have the multiple forms, too, so bear that in mind. The dramatically different arts.
Oh, yeah. Horse.
Yep.
Oh, yeah, we completely forgot to go over any of her powers.
Because I don't really know the lore of her powers.
Well, then she will, I'm sure, be featured in next year's update video.
Yeah.
Or the year after.
When I eventually have a good sense of her lore.
Yeah. This is just an example of, we know that if this went up without the update, it would be tragic. Simply because of how far ahead we are. I know I have strategically covered up the date for when we are recording these with my little video of myself, so it's actually covering where the date is. But
just know it's not even been a week since I streamed this chapter. Yeah.
The Lord has yet to rise. I'm gonna move ahead a little.
Go to the second form.
Yeah, just because
It's one of the longer ones because it's so new.
Yeah. Oh, third form. I mean, it does look really cool, I have to admit. You know what her third form kind of reminds me of? Anastasia in, like, shape, right? Because Anastasia also has that very, like, ball gown, like, poof dress. You know what I mean?
I mean, I was going to say she's much more shapely than Anastasia, but...
Well, yeah. Do you need a fidget?
No, I'm good.
Guillotine. Giant guillotine. I love it. We all need a giant guillotine in our lives.
The NP should be the same across both forms, but I could be wrong.
It looks like there's just a 2-3 stage NP right over here. I'm just checking some of her skill animations. Although they're not doing much, so...
Yeah. Ooh, Evil Flare.
Okay. NP. Oof. Just annihilation.
Yup.
Homie really just said, goodbye, humanity.
So look forward to the updates video when I can give you more lore on what her actual damn abilities are.
I mean, we have some. What about Avenger?
The skill names.
A bloodstained necklace. Alter attribute has changed from man to earth because of the skill, which includes innocent monster. False accusations involving a particular necklace. So the diamond affair. The 1.6 million livres. My love is eternal. Her love has now become akin to delusion, affecting effects on the target. Guillotine Ricanment, guillotine of mockery, B rank. Phantasm of the same name, expressed here as a skill. Then her first noble phantasm is Vae Victis, blessed by Marie Antoinette altar. A black lily blooms. It releases a curse, weakening and killing things within its range, causing inanimate objects to self-destruct. And her second noble phantasm is Guillotine Ricanment. Huge black guillotine, appears from the air, cuts enemies down. Same design as Sanson's noble phantasm. And then she also uses Guillotine Breaker in her attack animation. Interesting.
Yeah.
So somebody's been busy filling it out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good for whoever that is. I swear to God, Tacos, if you say it's you. All right, I guess we'll see you next time.
Actually, there might be one CE. We shouldn't have more than one.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about
Maybe.
CEs.
Actually, we might have a couple, but...
I completely forgot we might have CEs.
0 CE. Oh, no, there's
one. There's also some story artworks.
Oh, yeah, I remember those. I actually saw those in the
Also, there's a illustration by Ginka, her artist. Mind if I?
Yeah, go right ahead.
Cool.
This is like all once. It's actually pretty smoothly transitioned. It's kind of creepy in the actual story.
Oh, she was looking a little evil there in that last one. All right. We have been recording for 9 minutes, and I already cannot speak. Guillotine of ridicule. I had a dream a heavy black blade was stuck in the garden in the palace of Versailles, much like the guillotine blade that cut short the lives of the royal family. The pedestal is nowhere to be seen. There is only that heavy black blade. There is no pedestal. Where is the pedestal? As I look around, wondering, someone suddenly spoke to me. It's unnecessary, because everything in this garden, this country, this world, is a pedestal upon which you shall be beheaded.
Someone already translated that too. Like that we didn't have to machine translate this, and this was like a week ago.
Yeah. That was recent. Sometimes it tells you who translated it, but not this time. Interesting. All right. Now we'll see you again. Actually, there's an outro on the other part of the video. I'm just going to transition to that.
Whoop, whoop.
All right, so we'll see y'all next time. Like, comment, subscribe.